celebrate. I just wanna celebrate you. I just wanna celebrate you. I just wanna celebrate. I just wanna celebrate you. Stand up, show it off now. Give it all you can now. Give it all you got. Come on, stand up, show it off now. Give it all you can now. Give it all you got. Come on, come on. You're turning the pages and rearranging the life that you once knew. You're asking good questions and being the answers. Man, you got a heart of gold. Man, you got a heart that's true. And I just wanna celebrate you. I just wanna celebrate you. I just wanna celebrate. I just wanna celebrate you. I just wanna celebrate you. I just wanna celebrate. I just wanna celebrate you. Yeah. You're beautiful, you're fierce and strong. Don't let those haters do you wrong. Look in the mirror, wipe away those tears. Pick yourself up and dust yourself off. If you wanna say it, I'm good. If you wanna feel it, I'm good. Know you got a heart of gold, you're powerful, you know it's true. Don't you know you got it? I'm good. Don't you know you're everything and more? There's only one you, only one beautiful you. Baby, you're beautiful. Baby, you're beautiful. You got the fight, you got the will. You got a beauty that is real. Hold your head high, you're one of a kind. There's only one you, one beautiful you.
The school community in New Lexington, along with our union, has a really great idea about how to use an abandoned school to make sure a rural community like New Lexington is revitalized, not abandoned.
This building means a lot to our community. I mean, this is an old elementary school.
I've been working here for the last 2 years trying to get it ready to be renovated.
There's a lot of memories in this building. There's a lot of emotion in this building. And you know, what a great place to produce a product around workforce development of a community center where students can have wraparound services, after-school programs.
Our FFA, our Future Farmers of America program, planted these grapevines. So this was our first harvest.
So this is from the lab. This is from the FAD lab.
That's correct.
This is from the grapes.
Yep.
We have taken the things that we do really, really well at New Lexington High School.
Hey, if nobody's gonna eat first, I'm gonna.
Make sure that we have pathways for kids to jump right into. One of the things we did was we focused on welding.
We're bringing 3rd to 5th graders into the welding shop. We give them just some topical lessons on welding.
And now you made it so you can touch it and you don't burn yourself.
And then the 4th day, we turn the kids loose with a welder.
The kids come in and they're this big, and I'm thinking, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Well, I think high school. And
Wow.
the kids get so excited. You see how excited they are about
Yeah.
it. It's
Oh my God, they're
this
amazing.
is why we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's totally worth it.
I played the wing here, then I had the wild both of these sides.
Wow.
We're having a lot more high school kids taking welding classes this year. I'm close to 70.
We believe that if we touch workforce development with kids early and often, they will be more prepared as they grow within their school time.
We are putting them into jobs that with no college debt, right out of high school, that they can make an outstanding wage.
They are awesome, awesome kids. And this would not work without them.
You know, early on we were talking about, you know, how can we expand our vocational agriculture program and just explode, you know, this thing for kids. So this is popcorn that's been grown right here.
Wow.
We developed this barn, and what you kind of saw today when you went in there is you saw our high school FFA kids running a fully operational farm. Everything from, you know, feeding the animals, taking care of the animals. Our students go and they do the soil tests. They do the yield test. The farm's a pretty special place. When we talked about workforce development, and we talked about what that looked like along the, you know, the pre-K through 12 continuum, the union was right, they were involved in that.
In the middle of COVID, they were able to negotiate a contract in 3 days.
From an administrative lens, you know, anytime we're making those types of decisions, I'm including my union president.
It's been an amazing trip, but the through line is the tremendous dedication to this community, to its parents, to its children.
I would like to be able to walk into our businesses in our community and see all of our kids that have been trained and stayed and are staying right here in New Lexington and Perry County and being our local leaders.
And that's the promise and potential of public education.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here this morning. Welcome to Passion Meets Purpose, Promising Pathways Through Experiential Learning. Our conference today will define what experiential learning is, describe what it can do for all of our students in all of our communities, and how it is the educational transformation we need now. My name is Mary Catherine Ricker, and I am Executive Director of the Albert Schenker Institute. And on behalf of the Albert Schenker Institute, AFT, and the Center for American Progress, it is my honor to welcome you here this morning. We are also live streaming this event, so for everyone joining us in person and virtually, please join the conversation on your social media platform using the hashtag #RealSolutionsForKids. I would also like to welcome the journalists here today to cover Passion Meets Purpose, with a special welcome to the print journalists from Benjamin Banneker High School and the multimedia journalists from Elliott Hine Middle School. You can't hold an experiential learning conference without some experiential learning. Today, we are going to hear from experts in the field from across the United States, from education and business and government, about long-standing programs and about new opportunities. I'd like to take a point of personal privilege here at the beginning to share a story about the schools in Kirkhoven, Minnesota. Kirkhoven is a small town in Minnesota with a population of just under 800 people. When I was Commissioner of Education in Minnesota, I got to know Kirkhoven at the beginning of the pandemic, about 4 years ago this month. As Commissioner, I had asked educators across the state to be radically student-centered in their work as they moved to distance learning. Forget what you knew about your brick-and-mortar classrooms and meet the needs of students where they are now with what they are learning now. Design lessons for our students who need the most accommodations. First, our English language learners, students with special needs, students experiencing housing instability. And if you do that, you will work for every student. in an environment that caused us to rethink everything, the educators and administrators in Kirkhoven collaborated like never before. It started with the family and consumer science teacher who scrapped her original lessons, found a pattern for cloth masks online, and reorganized her supplies to deliver materials and instructions to all her students at home to make masks that would be donated to a local clinic so they could conserve their medical grade masks. The social studies teacher heard about it and was reminded of victory gardens and other World War II community efforts, so the social studies teacher scrapped their lessons and redesigned their lessons to state standards to reflect historical community endeavors during crisis. Now you get the idea where this is going. Soon other teachers were redesigning their lessons to create ambitious, interdisciplinary, school-wide experiential learning opportunities for all of their students. The band instructor heard about this and scrapped the music their students were practicing and found new music for the next concert that reflected the theme that was emerging across the district. Saints serve the effort. Needless to say, students and teachers were engaged. We have the opportunity to tap that serendipity and build the kind of sustainable and dynamic teaching and learning conditions our students deserve. While this story is about experiential learning that was brought on by crisis, the radically student-centered thinking is something that we can embrace at any time, especially now. This dynamic, unanticipated story is one to motivate us to meet the needs of our students by amplifying long-standing, proven hands-on learning and by designing new ways of teaching and learning across grade levels and subject areas. Essential learning does meet the needs of our students, and it can have an impact on our economy as well. I am pleased to welcome a video message from the Honorable Gina Raimondo, U.S. Secretary of Commerce, describing why the economy needs experiential learning.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to the Albert Shanker Institute, AFT, and the Center for American Progress for bringing this conference together. It's my honor to join you. Here at the Commerce Department, we know that economic development and workforce development are linked, and that hands-on experiential learning is one of the best ways to prepare our students for the workforce. We also have an opportunity, thanks to President Biden's Investing in America agenda. The federal government is investing more than $1 trillion in infrastructure, clean energy, high-speed internet, chip manufacturing, and more. We expect these investments to create hundreds of thousands of high-quality, good-paying jobs. But we need to develop a diverse, skilled workforce. In fact, I often hear from CEOs that they don't have enough workers to fill the job openings. We need workers to be job-ready on day one. This is an urgent challenge. Estimates show we'll have a shortage of 300,000 engineers and 90,000 technical workers by the end of the decade if we don't act now. That's why I've called on semiconductor companies to work with high schools and community colleges to train 100,000 new technicians over the next decade through apprenticeships, career and technical education, and career pathway programs. I also know that Randi Weingarten recognizes the urgency of this moment. I know that because shortly after the CHIPS Act was signed into law, she came to me and told me that the AFT wanted to be involved in implementation. She detailed a plan to bring AFT members together with a microchip company in New York to develop a novel high school curriculum directly targeted to the industry. I'm so excited to see the workforce pipelines that this pilot program will help to create, and hope to see its success replicated all across the country. By building these kinds of partnerships between labor, business, the public sector, and high schools, we will equip more students with the skills they need to find the jobs that are open today. And because of your leadership, more students will have the experiential learning opportunities that they need to set them on a path to high-quality, high-paying careers. I can't thank you enough for your willingness to support students all across America, and I look forward to continuing to work with you to build sustainable workforce pipelines. I wish you a very successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Raimondo. And from those long-time marquee examples, like career and technical education, art, music, theater, or physical education, to expanding examples of experiential learning, like Action Civics, Future Educators programs, P-TECH, it is clear that experiential learning is becoming the way to transform teaching and learning to best meet the needs of students. And I am pleased today to begin with practitioners from across the country who are steeped in experiential learning practices as teachers and leaders. I have the privilege of moderating the first panel, so please welcome these practitioners to the stage. Raphael Bonhomme, an educator at School Within School at Goding, District of Columbia Public Schools. Peggy Brookins, the president of the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. Valerie Holtis, president of Anoka Hennepin Education Minnesota, Local 7007. Manny Lamare, Deputy Assistant Secretary, U.S. Department of Labor, Employment, and Training Administration. Zaria McLymore, attorney, community advocate, and graduate of Newburgh P-TECH program. And Kwesi Rollins, Vice President for Leadership Engagement at the Institute for Educational Leadership. Thank you all for joining me. It's wonderful to have you here. I would like to get us started, but I want to make sure I hear a little bit from each of you about just what you want to make sure this audience knows about the work you've done in experiential learning. Raphael, can I start with you? Great. So you started teaching before the pandemic, and you have kept teaching through it. As a classroom teacher, I'd like to know, what is something important the pandemic revealed to us about K-12 education in America?
Well, thank you for the question. Hello, everybody. It's very early, but K through 12 education after the pandemic, a lot of things have been revealed, right? I'm pretty sure in your states, in your cities, in your communities, even in your homes, you've seen a lot of change in kids. Maybe they're not brushing their teeth at the same time, or maybe they don't know how to tie their shoes the way that they used to. I say all of that because the pandemic did show that kids need to be around teachers. They need to have a hug. They need to be felt. They need to have support. And a lot of that before the pandemic existed, but the pandemic really showed how important that was. Now, ever since then, it's been hard to duplicate that for many, many issues. The pandemic has restricted a lot of places around the country about what teachers can do with kids. In addition to that, a lot of restrictions have gone up. So I would say that since the pandemic, it's been very vital for teachers to try to bring back that joy and do things with their students that have been missing. A lot of interpersonal skills like communicating, teamworking. Students have been isolated. They've been away and they've been, I guess, just given the opportunity to fend for themselves. Get on a laptop at this time. We trust you. Go onto Microsoft Teams or Zoom. Now kids are back in the classrooms and they have to be retaught how to actually collaborate with others. It's very, very important. And a lot of times, you know, teachers during the pandemic would do virtual field trips, but that's not the same thing as a real field trip. Seeing a llama on a computer is not the same thing as touching a llama, or tasting pineapple. I've had students do apple tasting tests in science class, it's not the same thing as just looking and watching videos of other people eating apples. Like, my favorite apple is a Honeycrisp apple, and that's not usually what students really go for. They go for like Granny Smith and stuff like that. So, you know, all of those things are lacking since the pandemic, but it is very important to bring those things about. So a lot of experiences were missing during the pandemic, and I think it's been difficult for many teachers across the country to bring those opportunities and experiences back to K through 12 education.
Thank you. Thank you. Kwesi, you are a national leader in the community schools movement, and we've talked a lot about this, and so I'd love to hear you say more about how the community schools strategy aligns with experiential learning.
Thanks for that, and good morning. So for those that don't know what community schools are, it's really a strategy where schools are the hub of the community, and there are intensive partnerships that ensure before and after school extended learning, expanded learning, and really you bring all the resources, financial, partnership, love, caring, together around the school to provide the services and supports for a lot of schools around the country where kids who are not in well-to-do families or well-to-do communities aren't able to take advantage of the same kind of resources, opportunities, et cetera. So in that sense, it's much more than wraparound services. It's really an opportunity for everybody to come together and provide the kind of safety net that all kids deserve. Community schools, having said that, are the perfect kind of vehicle for experiential learning as part of curriculum and also as part of expanded learning. I think about recently, a couple of months ago in preparation for our national conference, we took a trip to Columbus, Georgia, and to a little city across a little bridge called Phoenix City, Alabama. In fact, you don't even know you're in Alabama. You kind of cross this bridge and then you're magically in Alabama. There's no sign saying welcome to Alabama, any of that. But I bring that up because the United Way of the Chattahoochee Valley is one of the major partners that supports the community school strategy in that portion of Georgia as well as Alabama. And one of the first things we visited was Dorothy Height Elementary School. And Dorothy Height Elementary School partners with an organic farm that's in the area, and that organic farm is connected to a wonderful restaurant. And so kids in the community have an opportunity to learn about farming, to learn about farm to table, to learn about organic farming, to learn about food preparation. Just as you can imagine, the whole gamut. And their families also get to eat at a great restaurant. We had lunch at this particular restaurant where almost all the food came from this organic farm. And so that's just one example, and you can imagine not only is this about learning, but it's also about connection and about community. And one of the things that I think was mentioned in terms of the pandemic, you can't really get that love and connection in the same way in a virtual environment. And so having that level of connection is very important. The other example in Phoenix City, just across that little bridge, they have a boxcar, drag car racing unit. This is a little tiny school in rural Alabama that has competed with electric cars. They have a team. They scored first and second in competitions around the country out of 200 schools. They learn engineering, teamwork, problem solving, the whole thing. It's all part of their curriculum. And in the first speaker talked about the dearth of engineering students, right? So they're growing little engineers in Phoenix City, Alabama, at a community school.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. Val, I'd love to jump to you. You are a union leader right now, and I know you are a licensed CTE teacher as well, and you ran an experiential learning program for students. Could you tell us a little bit about the internship program you led?
Sure. Our district has a couple of programs. One of them is STEP. It's called Secondary Technical Education Program. And just a little history about that. Our technical school was about to close. Minnesota Department of Education announced that they were going to close our tech school. So our community was very upset about that. So we all worked very hard and with the school district, with our community, and with our state legislature to keep this school open. And our school district decided to put in quite a bit of money to add an addition to our VOTEC school, and that's the birth of STEP. And at STEP we have high school students that attend this program, and they are some 10th graders, but mainly 11th and 12th graders, and they're able to focus on a variety of careers, such as cosmetology, what am I trying to say here? Cosmetology, thank you so much. And and welding and construction and computer programming and cybersecurity. There's lots of programs there where they can actually gain certification to move right on into a career after they graduate from high school. And it's such a wonderful economic injection for these kids. Another program that we have is called Pathways, and that program is for students who are, have been diagnosed with a disability, either a learning disability or an emotional disability or behavioral disability. And I work with a lot of those students. And at Pathways, we were able to create different learning experiences for them. Because as a work-based learning teacher, what I did at my high school, I worked with these special education students to try and find them jobs, internship types of jobs. But it was really hard to have companies and other businesses in my community to take these students because they had no experience whatsoever. They had nothing to put down on the resume. So our district decided with our CTE program, our Career and Tech Ed program, to create this Pathways program, and we found an old 60s era mall that was vacant, and we transformed this mall into different work type stations. So in this mall we created a store where people donated clothes, so the students learned how to set up a store and had a cash register, and it was kind of like a Goodwill, and we would sell these things. We had an area where we would get computer components, old computers, and the students would take them apart and sort them in different recycling bins. We had a food shelf. We bought some industrial sewing machines, and students learned how to make flags. So we would buy flags that were already printed, and they would hem the flags with these sewing machines. We also bought some industrial laundry machines, you know, washers and dryers, and they would wash the uniforms of all of our high school sports teams. And that's just to name a few of the things we started at our Pathways program. So now, when I came to an employer or a business in my community with a special education student, they had something to put down on their resume. They had something to put down for experience in their application. So it was a wonderful thing, and I'd have to say I'm very proud of that program. In fact, it's been so successful that we're ditching the 1960s mall, and we've closed one of our elementary schools that had low attendance, and we're converting that elementary school into that Pathways program. So there's so many things that can be done, and you just have to think about who has the resources, who has the ideas, and who has the materials, who's got the money to do programs like this. And there's a lot of pushing a lot of stress, a lot of sleepless nights to get some of these programs up and running, but it's a very good thing. I think that my students are best when they're doing hands-on activities. In these programs like STEP and Pathways, our behavior referrals are 0. In my class where I teach living skills and how to get a job, and a big one, how to keep a job, they're not so good at sitting at a desk. That's not their thing. And I've had some pretty extreme behaviors, and the pandemic was not helpful in that area at all. It was sort of like this period of time where it's just Lord of the Flies, and they are just directionless. Students need that structure, and they need a direction and a focus, certainly after they graduate high school. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Peggy, you've heard a few examples, teaching and learning examples, and you are a board certified teacher in addition to leading the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards. I'd love for you to talk about how experiential learning relates to accomplished teaching.
So, Mary Catherine, this has been my life, my entire life as a STEM teacher. And I think sometimes people get the wrong impression about CTE. And career and technical education is every field out there has someone who has gone through some kind of career and technical education. And thinking about the fact that, people used to think this was a dumping ground for individuals. It is not. They also thought that, if you're not doing well over here, then we'll put you in the CTE area and maybe you'll flourish or maybe you'll learn some skill. These are highly sought after skills. And what the plumber charged me 2 weeks ago, I wish I was a plumber. And thinking about, in our standards for board certification, and I started in engineering school in 1994. And just hearing about the soft skills, hearing about that sense of belonging, hearing about everybody has a place and can do certain jobs with the right instruction and also in the right environment. And so we brought in students who nobody thought could be engineers. And they are engineers to this day. And thinking about, we had honors classes, we had AP classes, and the experience of the curriculum that we wrote for them was experiential. Because I'm thinking about, if you go to the movies and you can come home and you can tell everybody what happened in the movie. So we did our curriculum through stories. And I created a story with the problem that had to be solved. And in solving that problem, you had to work in teams because nobody works in isolation the rest of their life. You also had to have materials. You had to have a budget. You had to do research. You had to understand the mathematics. You had to understand the physics. You have to understand the social ethics behind what you're creating or doing. And these are all, skills that students get in CTE. The CTE standard for the National Board is incredibly rigorous because those jobs lives depend on those jobs. And so when we think about the experiences that we can provide for students every single day, and I'll give you one example. We had business partners of Duke Energy and Lockheed Martin. You can make mistakes there. And one of the things that we did before we even created the academy was talk to the Economic Development Council to see 50 years out, where are we going? Who do you need? What skills do they have to have in order to seek the jobs that will be there for the future? Because we're not training them for now. We're training them well into the future. And for them to be learners, to be able to change careers, and to be able to work together in ways and learn things quickly and under pressure. And CTE does this for so many students. We also had a technical component that you got a certification. Our juniors in high school were certified in AutoCAD. They could go out as a junior in high school and make $20 an hour immediately, more. So when we think about the opportunities, and I would just want to connect it to young children and making sure that young children have these experiences and they expect those experiences when they're older. That they step into a classroom and they feel like they belong there and that they are challenged in a way that lets them know you have a skill set and that skill set is valuable, but to give them an opportunity to determine if they want to change career, expose them to everything. But I think we have to have teachers supported and give them the experiences that allow them to step into those classrooms and then give that to their students.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peggy. Manny, I think one of the things we've started to hear is this commitment to all of our students. And in your career, there is a clear commitment to all students in your work. And in making sure that everybody benefits. So how do you see experiential learning leveling the playing field for young people, and what's some of the work you've been doing to do just that?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mary. First, welcome everyone. You all are like the super warriors that are here early in the morning, engaged, whether virtual or online, so just thank you for being here. Just really quickly, a good question, and I think it connects to two things I heard from Valerie and Peggy. And I often go back to this. A few years back when I was in Nevada, when I working on policy and workforce for young people, one of the first things I did a statewide survey on barriers youth face to training and employment. So it consisted of both survey online, but as well as going across the state to do focus group with young people, because it's important to actually hear from them and hear their perspectives. Two things came to mind from this and connects to your specific question. The first thing is, I remember a young lady said, how can we get experience if every job we apply to requires experience? And so I go back to think about Peggy, what Peggy and Valerie just talked about. But then on the other end, when I talk to employers working a lot with industry, particularly associations, employers, labor, I hear another, when you juxtapose this saying, they said, we hire for hard skills, we fire for soft skills. And so when I think about when you put those two together, on the one hand about the experience, and on the other hand around making sure that they're prepared, what are then the kind of things that are consistent across the work that we're doing? And I think there's three things in particular that we see that is successful. The first one is there's meaningful exposure, right? The meaningful exposure is really intentional, that it's hands-on. So it goes to what everyone has been saying. When you have that exposure, then the second layer is how to ensure that it's, one, aligned to education and aligned to industry. So the curriculum, the training is actually relevant, and the individuals are gaining those relevant skills that is immediately applicable. And then the third thing, when I think about going from meaningful exposure, hands-on learning, is access to career supports and services. And this is where I think it ties into everything I think that you all are doing, whether it's in the audience or on the panel, is around being intentional around equity. And so in the past, when we talk about career technical education and the importance of alignment, now actually some of the best schools that I visited were all career technical education schools that blended those pieces and models together. However, now I think it's even more important to be super intentional, because some of the schools I visited had the highest graduation rate, the best connection to post-secondary, the best opportunities to employment. What we want to make sure is that to ensure that both communities, and the people of color, individuals with disability, when we really think about making sure that women are exposed, young women are exposed to a wide range of industries and sectors, how do we be intentional about ensuring that they're connected? At the Department of Labor, we've been really, really intentional, and again, thank you for the opportunity, because Department of Labor, we want to be engaged in this conversation. We have a youth employment work strategy that really in the past 20 years haven't really, we've been thinking about and really laying out this strategy around, one, ensuring there's a no wrong door approach to young people, but then two, when we talk about the work experience, it has to be a hands-on learning, but it has to be paid. We particularly, obviously depending on the age range, but we do think that's also a component of equity as well when we talk about work experience. And so when we do pre-apprenticeships, registered apprenticeships, we encourage that aspect, particularly for the pre-apprenticeship. But of course, in a registered apprenticeship, it automatically is a paid experience. So that's, some of the work that we've been doing. We're also scaling for both young people that are, whether they're in school or out of school. So we have programs like Youth Build or Job Corps. We have Job Corps that's across 120 places across the country to ensure that young people, whether you're coming directly from the K-12 pipeline or maybe you're in between, to ensure that there's opportunities to those hands-on training so that they have those appropriate skills and to be successful.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Zaria, we've been talking a lot about students so far and their experiences, and you are here as a graduate and as an advocate. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about how the P-TECH program you graduated from aided you in your pursuit of law and community service.
Ooh, I love this question, and good morning to everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. So when it comes to the P-TECH program, literally since day one, we were learning things like community building and group work. I remember absolutely connecting with the students that I was introduced to, because it was everybody's first time, but at the same time, that was able to start building our skills when it comes to networking. Being able to communicate with people. We mentioned that, the lack of soft skills and hard skills is an issue that we have today. So being able to communicate, to network with people, to get to know people, but also being able to be a leader, but also what's considered to be a follower as well. In order to even be a great leader, you have to be able to be a follower in the way of being able to listen to people. That's really important, and that's something that I've learned how to do, because when it comes to the community work that I've been doing within my city, Newburgh, and just to even give somebody a little background on my city, we're known, Newburgh, New York specifically, is known as one of the top most violent cities in all of New York. So when it comes to the advocacy work that I'm doing within my city, I'm making sure to give all of my community members as many opportunities as possible, like the P-TECH program had given me. I was able to graduate with a degree in cybersecurity while also graduating with my high school diploma. So when I was 18, I ended up going to also Brooklyn College right after. All my credits transferred, which was an amazing opportunity for me, because I didn't have to go to school as long, and I also didn't have to worry about all of the financial struggles that do come with college. And then right after that, I went to law school, and I'm able to, I'm able to advocate for people in the way that I would love to be able to see it being happening. So yeah, I'm just, to be honest, I'm so grateful for the opportunity from P-TECH, because it was able to once again connect me in terms of different opportunities and networking. I even did a whole TEDx speech within my program. So, and that was right before I had even graduated. We did a lot of different programs when it came to different types of awareness when it comes to the community issues that we see and have either right directly within our city or really worldwide. Yeah, so that's, it was a wonderful time.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And again, all of you created these incredibly dynamic descriptions and this wonderful view of teaching and learning when experiential learning is prioritized. And so I'd love to just open it up and you've had the chance to meet each other a little bit, but just visit with each other as well as me about what you've seen students gain as a result of approaching a topic through an experiential learning lens.
I think for me in engineering, all the things that we did, they were real life, real time. And I remember the first 3 weeks of opening the school, we had somebody come from Boston. They had a traffic problem that they needed to solve. So I brought my freshmen in because they were algebra students at the time. And he was saying, oh, we've had all this trouble. We can't solve this problem. And I said, just give us a little bit. He gave us the problem, stepped away, kind of let us know. And in about 35 minutes, students said, solved, got it. So he kind of chuckled, looked at me and chuckled that's impossible because he hadn't solved the problem. Yes. They presented the problem to him, solved the problem, and his mouth fell open, and he was like, you just made $50,000 in 35 minutes. And we said, okay, donate it to us because we would like it as well. And it's things like that. There's industry where we lived, and there were warehouses, and everybody who has those little icings and the decorations that go on cakes, we solved their problem too, because they had a palate problem in that there was a moisture buildup, and that moisture buildup was ruining semis worth of, cake decorations. They came to us, we reprogrammed the program they had set up, we reconfigured the truck so that they could get even more pallets on the truck, presented to the CEO, and 3 of my students worked there right after that. So these opportunities that come up, I think one of the biggest is Duke Energy, who was our business partner, was having trouble. People have to climb these high poles, they have to do all this stuff, and they said, we can solve your problem. We had a lot of storms, we lived in Florida, and we said to them, we'll create a drone. And that drone will come up, they will do inspection. It'll also allow you to real-time, first-person view. We use goggles. And you could fly the drone anywhere to say, oh, trees are down, don't send the truck in that direction. Let's just find a route for the truck to go. And they use that today. We did that in 2009, but that is what they use today. Those guys don't climb poles anymore. When there's a storm, they don't go out before they send the drone out to see what damage there is. Kids did that. They did it all.
So, before I give you some fluffy answers, but let me give you some more details and some things that I've done in my classroom. I'm not really sure who's in the room. I don't know everybody's name, and maybe some of you forget my name. However, I hope you remember some of the things that I share. So, just think about your own experience with education and what you actually remember. Do you remember taking multiplication tests, memorizing multiplication facts? But what did you actually do with all that information? Why was it important? See, when I was a kid, I remember memorizing a lot of facts, so it was just rote memorization, and I didn't know why. Didn't really care. I learned about my local government, but who really cared? Because how did that affect me? So with my students, what I've done to have them experience and see why things such as civics is important, I asked them a question in the beginning of a unit. What can you change in your community? What can you change at your school? What is great about it? What's missing? Once students are asked a certain question or are faced with a problem, they're more attuned, they are more connected. So I'm hearing a lot from the older kids and all of that, but I could give you the stuff about what the younger kids are doing. Besides not brushing their teeth and not wiping their nose and forgetting to wash their hands, kids are really, really curious. So they know and they see problems around them. So things like rats, things like, hey, Anacostia River is dirty. Maybe there's a lot of noise in their community, or maybe they need some more bike lanes. I've heard all of this and some. Now, kids, to feel that civics is important, besides just reading about it, they have to go to the people with power. So let's go down the ranks. I've had kids think about what are some issues in their communities that they want to change. They reach out to their ANC members, which are just the local representatives in their neighborhoods. Some of these kids actually have gone past these people, haven't even noticed it, right? So now they're connected to somebody that might be a neighbor. It might have influence on something changing in their community. One student last year said their community needed a community garden. He sent an email with the help of his mom to his ANC member, and that ANC member thanked them and said, you know what? We are having a meeting just about this topic, and we'll let you know. 2 weeks later, after the meeting, they reached back out to the student and said that in the next year, they're going to make a community garden, right? So that kid felt like he did something. Even if he really didn't do anything, he still felt like he did something. He still felt that he was connected, besides just reading about the local government. Also, RFK, formerly the home of the Washington Redskins. A lot of my students play soccer or have gone past it, and it looks like something out of a zombie post-apocalypse type of situation. Now, a lot of the kids have a lot of different ideas about what should be done with RFK. If you don't have time before you leave, you could look up what RFK looks like or look the most recent news, pieces of that infrastructure have fallen on people. So that's where that place is. But it's huge. A lot of my students had great ideas, turn it into apartments, get the football team back into DC, a lot of this stuff. Hey, your teacher, me, Mr. Bonhomme, I can't do any of that. I can't change that. But you know who can? The local government, your council members. So what do? They drafted up different proposals, came up with different questions that were important, and we went to our version of City Hall. Now, we went to the chairman of the council, and it was very interesting because the chairman wanted to be politically correct and didn't want to say exactly the ideas that they had for RFK, but the kids felt as if they had the opportunity to be in a space where they could actually make a change and difference. See, that's what the difference is, I think, on my end, on trying to teach elementary school kids. You can have them just read about it in the textbooks, or you can actually have them feel connected to it. Because when they become adults, they're gonna naturally have that feeling as if it wasn't learning. It wasn't learning. It wasn't something forced that they had to do. It was built off of their curiosity. It was built off of things that they like. I have more things to add, but I know I'm taking up a lot of space right now.
Great examples. I saw you jump in.
Yeah, no, and thanks for that, because, you know, I just wanted to build on that, because if you've been paying attention to education these days, you know that we have a crisis with chronic absenteeism, we have low enrollment, and the reasons, of course, vary across the age groups and communities, et cetera, but one of the common threads is related to this whole topic of kids not feeling connected. And kids not feeling that they're getting something meaningful out of their school experience. And then sometimes their parents kind of saying, well, you can just do virtual today, or not also kind of being in that space where there's sufficient connection. And so I think experiential learning at its best really provides that opportunity. It builds off of intention around connection and meaningful education, meaningful problem solving. Who wants to get up early and get to school by 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then you're just reading stuff off of a sheet of paper and you're not engaged, you're not excited about that. I wouldn't be excited about that if we think about our own experiences. We know the kinds of meetings and things that we like to go to. And we know the kinds of meetings and conversations that we avoid because, oh my God, can I make it through this 45-minute meeting? So I think that's part of the answer to a lot of what the whole country is facing, is figuring out how to be more engaged, how to be more connected, how to solve problems, how to be learning in a context where it's really connected to what's going on with your life and what's going on with your desire to have a better life.
I am so happy that you brought up the connection to community and having students think about how they can change their community. I have spent many years on my city council, and we had an issue of our middle school students at the end of the day going to the park next door and vandalizing it and just trashing it. And it was just sad. And our community really needed something for these kids to do, something that was structured and something that was positive. So it took a long time and a lot of effort, but we were able to build a community center next to that middle school. And we teamed up with the YMCA, and it was just the best thing in the world. And I always had kids in tow with me when I went to my city council meetings. And I'm sure the other council members were thinking, oh my gosh, what is she gonna do now? What is she gonna have these kids do now? And they had such a feeling of accomplishment and just membership in their community. And it was, and it was fun. They learned a lot about not using the word they. They need to fix this. They need to do something about our lines in the lunchroom. They need to improve how things work around our building. They need to improve how they line up the buses. There's no they. My students had to come up with who they is and how you can change it. So that's, and when they did see change, it was just, it was a great thing. They just felt so invested in their school and in their community. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about community.
So like what's been addressed is, once again, the main issue is that students don't feel connected to what we're learning in school. I can be honest with you guys and say that outside of my basic math, what's needed, I don't use anything I learned in like a calculus class or like, extreme algebra. Like, that's not my category. But in my senior year, what one of my school projects was to do a summer youth program. And that was one of my favorite programs that we had implemented, because we were getting a lot of like local students and like Newburgh talents performing at, this program that we were doing. And it was like poetry. I did like, my TEDx speech like at the summit itself. We had like different like middle school and elementary schools students actually be involved as well. They were doing like cute little science fairs, but what the actual topic of that fair was, what are the issues that you would like to see solved within our city? And then not only did we, open up the floor to a lot of Newburgh talents, but we even like went to council meetings and advocated for the fact that we needed this program, but not just the program, but the solutions that the students were going to offer at the program. That's something that's important, because at the end of the day, once again, we need to feel connected to what we're learning in school. As you can see, and what's once again been mentioned, is that you're gonna see a student be bored in school, bored in class, like when, once again, they're not really feeling like they're learning something that they're going to bring to their real life. So the importance of experiential learning is to, once again, like just be able to say, you know what, let me actually listen, because I know I'm actually gonna need this in a couple weeks or even in a couple years, versus going to these math classes or something that really isn't as important to students or even maybe as needed per se, and actually bringing the real world to actual school. The point of learning is to be able to be prepared, but then also being able to solve problems within your own thinking. So why aren't we addressing those within our schools instead of allowing us to, once again, like just not really have the, I'll say like the opportunities that we really need within our schools?
Thank you. And all of you are bringing up these really vibrant examples, and it reminds me of when I was teaching. I had fall conferences with my my students and their families, and they weren't that well attended. And they also, for anyone who's been a parent or an educator, those traditional cattle call conferences are fairly miserable for everyone. And so I spent some time over the winter determining like, well, why, like what were some of the barriers to conferences? And in the spring, I actually asked my principal for permission to set up, instead of doing traditional parent-teacher conferences, I worked with a local bookstore to set up poetry readings for all of my classes. And each class was assigned a night instead. And if you couldn't make that night, if your family couldn't make that night, you could certainly come to another class's night. And you could stay for the whole thing and hear everyone's reading, or you could just come for you and your students' reading and leave. And they were brilliantly attended. Students cheering for each other after they finished reading, and some students had prose to read instead of poetry. Those accommodations were fantastic. It was just a different assignment, and their families got to see their work and not just hear about their work. And it really changed the trajectory of how I thought of experiential learning for students and for their families. I had to break down some barriers to do that, and I am hearing these great examples, and I'm thinking behind all of those great examples was probably a barrier you needed to break down, or maybe a myth you needed to bust about the work you wanted to do with your students, or the work you wanted to do as a student. And so I'm wondering if any of you, with our last few minutes here, have some advice for breaking down barriers that are preventing more experiential learning, or what are some pathways that really helped you grow your programs?
I can speak to that. In our STEP program, we have several teachers who come from the careers, from their own careers. For example, we have auto mechanics that are teaching auto mechanics. We have nurses that are teaching certification to be a nurse's assistant. Now, these individuals could be making a lot more money in their field. So that's a barrier that we face all of the time, is to make sure that those openings are filled for those teachers. And what kind of professional development do those teachers need? It's a hard thing to figure out how to provide them relevant and meaningful professional development for those teachers. So what we do is we have an advisory committee, and we meet 2 times a year. And in that committee, we include individuals from all of the industries that we work with, and some of those teachers get some more advice and some direction of where this career path is going. You know, what technical changes, you know, do we see in the future? So we know that we're not going off in the wrong direction, and you know, keeping with the modern changes that each of these career fields are seeing. So just the advisory committee 2 times a year helps us a little bit with that.
Smart.
I think for me, what we did was provide that professional development that was necessary for teachers to step into the classroom without fear, and to be able to not be the sage on the stage all the time, to lean out and let students do what they needed to do. So I paid for national board certification for every teacher who wanted to go through the process. And in those standards is experiential learning.
So when I think about the conversation or the question around what are some kind of challenges or pieces, 3 things come to mind. Funding, perceptions is the second one. Funding, perceptions, as well as, another example could be liability. I'll talk just really quickly in like 45 seconds about all 3 of those. The first one is on funding that we often hear as a barrier. And so for that, one of the things I often mention is that the importance and the power of partnerships. And so this is why, again, just being pleased to be engaged through the Department of Labor, because I think oftentimes there's an area that solves one part of the problem, but another area is wrestling with a different part of the problem. So this is why we have currently, for example, right now, we actually have $95 million out for our Apprenticeship Building America funding, where you could, there's different categories where education aligned pre-apprenticeships, apprenticeship hubs, and as well as pre-apprenticeship programs where K-12 partners are all eligible entities to really partner and leverage those funding. And so I say that to say, though, that think around and outside of just your traditional partners to really kind of dive into the different opportunities. 2, liability is something I've often heard about. And again, for that, I've seen different ways, and there's different ways to leverage and address that, whether sometimes it's the school districts may have insurance, but also depending on the program that you're doing, we've seen intermediaries. So we invest in intermediaries and organizations that really takes on the students, and so that to minimize the employer's concern. And I think it goes to a third one, which is industry engagement. Right? That's often another challenge we hear. Like, how do we really engage industry? Or how do we ensure policymakers and stakeholders in our community are aware and know that we're doing great work? And for that, a few quick examples I'll mention is that one is I often advocate for career technical education partners to sit on your state and local workforce boards. And really, so the state and local workforce board, they're made up of at least 50% industry partners, and to start building that advocacy and really articulate to those stakeholders, hey, we're doing a great program. Hey, here's where you could lay out your vision for your state. When your state have to articulate their vision for workforce development, making sure that they're actually connected and partners. And oftentimes, we're often trying to seek that partnership. So one example that I've also mentioned is that, and I've said before too, is that one of the things I've done is actually brought our career technical education director and we put her on our apprenticeship committee back when on the state level, so that now everyone's being educated and aware. So it's not just, apprenticeship is not just one industry sector. There's a whole host of industry sectors, whether we're talking about cybersecurity, teaching, and it runs the gamut. And then the final thing I'll just close on is just like the importance of partnerships. The partnership is really, really, really critical, because it sounds almost cliche to say that we can't do alone, but I'll give you some concrete examples of how the partnerships can be leveraged. In addition to the funding, it helps us communicate better and reach the right audience. So I've been pleased to work with our Assistant Secretary of Career Technical Education at Department of Education to help us really understand at the labor side, how do we engage and communicate with the education audience? So one example I often say is that I might say RTI, and you might be like, that sounds way more fancier than it really needs to be. It's just classroom instruction. But in the workforce apprenticeship world, we say related technical instruction, but all that is classroom instruction. But also seeing exposure. So a few weeks ago now, or maybe last month, I joined our Assistant Secretary, Amy Lloyd, in New York, the New York School of Arts and Design, seeing students and industry and partners, like they're working directly with employers, but at the same time, the students are also getting that exposure and working that connection across a whole host of industry. So I just think like those pieces around the partnership, again, industry engagement, liability, funding, exposure, all of those are things that I've seen as challenges or barriers, but there's solutions to all of those pieces if you start partnering with the right individuals and organizations and entities to really scale some of those out.
Fantastic. Yeah, please.
So when it comes to students, I believe that flexibility in learning is extremely needed. So I was in a computer-based program, so I could have gained a degree in cybersecurity or networking. I chose the path of cybersecurity, but I'm not really an extreme tech computer person. So at the end of the day, I chose like more of the social sciences route, but I still used the opportunity that was granted to me to be able to go into the field that I desired. Within the program, I have my best friends. They use their cybersecurity degrees to do like biomedical engineering at Georgia Tech. I have another friend who's coding at IBM, but I decided to use my degree and go more law focused. So it's really just about granting students the opportunity, but then being able to, once again, allow them to kind of learn in the ways that they need. So I didn't even, there were internship opportunities for IBM that was offered. I actually chose to intern with like a council person within my city. And the thing is, once again, I use the skills that I learned from P-Tech when it comes to networking, being able to talk to people, and just once again, like being able to also multitask, because we were taking high school classes, college classes, we were also doing a lot of community work all at the same time. And mind you, we were also in high school, so it was like, that's a lot to handle. Like we're 16 years old, like doing all of this, but it really did prepare us in order to be able to be the people that we are today. I know for a fact that I wouldn't be able to have advanced as an attorney at 23 without the P-Tech program. So once again, just like flexibility within learning is extremely important, because everybody learns at different paces. Everybody has different things that they like to focus on. So I think that that's really important.
Thank you.
So I would say, there are lots of barriers depending on the context. I mean, one of the benefits of working with community school initiatives all around the country is you see how those barriers play out in different ways. You also see that because the whole strategy is about deep partnership and collaboration, all of the possibilities. But I would say that, there are a couple of barriers worth mentioning. Low expectations. You used the word perception, right? Low expectation, these kids, because of whatever, can't really do this. The other part of the perception is sometimes principals, folks in school districts that have a lot of authority, there's a lot of pressure, so there's a lot of pressure in schools that goes up and down the chain. There's a lot of urgency and a need to solve complex problems, like low enrollment is a complex problem. Chronic absenteeism is a complex problem. And if you are a gatekeeper, a person that makes key decisions, if you don't perceive experiential learning or some aspects of that as adding value your ability to solve that problem or to raise test scores or whatever, you're going to be less inclined to do that. So I think one of the strategies is really to understand in a deep way, what's the root cause of the challenge, what's the root cause of the negative perception, and to really make the case. So we see this in family engagement all the time. Most folks think that it's a great idea to engage families, but when it comes down to time to actually do it, they're not so sure, they don't know how to do it, they don't attach money to it, they don't understand the value. Well, you're not going to solve the enrollment problem without better engaging kids and families. You're just not. So that's part of the solution across the board. And being able to make that case to people who are skeptical is a good strategy. And so their skepticism goes hand in hand with high pressure because you can't solve complex problems overnight. But you do have to be open-minded enough to try some other kind of solutions.
Yeah, thank you all. I think, oh yeah, please jump in.
So I've been pondering here for a little bit. Every morning I wake up at 5 a.m. to walk my toy poodle. So Mary Catherine, forgive me, because I already told her, I texted her very early and I had to apologize. But that's when my brain and my day starts, all right? So we have some middle school kids in here. I'm going to ask them a question in just a moment. But I need all of your help with something. I just came up with, hopefully something that you could walk away with. It's threes, training, time, and I had assessments, but training, time, and tests. So I'm trying to go with either the 3 T's, T to the power of 3, since I'm a math teacher, or the triple T. I haven't figured out which one yet is going to catch on. You could all help me out. But I'll break each one of those down. Training. I've been doing a lot of work with the AFT for the last 2 or 3 years, especially post the pandemic, in terms of putting together professional development for teachers who are AFT members around civics education. Me, specifically, I've been focusing on experiential learning, role plays, and simulations. The example that I gave was an example of a simulation. I forgot to say that even though that unit is done, the students have created a student council, and they're meeting weekly. Some students are bribing other students, bringing gummy bears. I don't want to talk about that right now, but they're learning real politics at an early age. All right? Now, the training. Teachers need more training. As I said, the AFT has created a professional development to provide training in terms of civics education and experiential learning. There are other resources as well. However, teachers do need additional support with that. So we can't just expect teachers to just bring this to the classroom without having multiple exposure to the training so they feel comfortable and it's not something else that's on their plate. So time. Teachers need time to learn this. It's not going to happen overnight. Give teachers some time. There's a lot of initiatives in education that if they don't see positive results in 2 to 3 years, then school districts, they'll flip to something else. It might be something to do with contracts and money, but I don't get paid enough to talk about that. What I need to tell you all is that teachers don't have a lot of time to let things marinate, like kombucha or like beer or like sake or wine, whatever you drink, it takes time to ferment and to become something good, right? So just remember that when you go home tonight or late on Friday night, it takes some time to become great. Now, also another thing with time is that we're not given enough time in the classroom to actually do these things, especially since I'm getting to this third one, tests. Now, middle school students, do you feel like you take a lot of tests in school? There you go. I don't have to say any more, but I will. Because there has been an over-the-top focus on standardized tests. Now, if we're talking about experiential learning, I have a plan. I have a solution. I've been thinking about this for a while. Students can be doing experiential learning activities, units from pre-K up until K through 12, and you talked about this earlier, of having things to provide when they are in 12th grade, when they go to college, or when they go to some type of training force or any other type of after high school experience that they want to get into. They can have a portfolio that is enough evidence of all the work that they've done throughout their K through 12 education. We live in 2024 where ChatGPT is very useful. So all of that stuff could live digitally, where kids are showing their products, their presentations throughout their whole academic career to provide something that will also be with the SATs, that will also be with their GPA. Because mind you, I'm up here talking on the stage and I fell asleep during my SAT 3 times. So my GPA in high school would not have predicted that I would be in a position that I'm at right now. So if there were portfolios and things that existed that I could bring that, people would have believed in me much more back then. So I believe in a lot of my students, and then in addition to tests, state assessments and all of that, there's too much emphasis on that. And like I said, that's another question, that's another topic, but I'm pretty sure that there are multiple ways of assessing students' intelligences. Howard Gardner said it back in the 80s. A lot of us are familiar with that, so I'm at awe that we don't have that down together. So those 3 T's, whatever you like, training, time, and test, please keep those in mind. And I think those are some of the things that can actually change whatever is stopping teachers from implementing this stuff.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This has just been an incredibly invigorating conversation. And thank you all. Right now, across the country, unless they're on spring break, there are millions of students and educators and community organizations working right now to strengthen teaching and learning conditions. And thank you so much for giving the audience here and virtually a glimpse of everything that goes into that, and quite frankly, everything that comes out of that for educators and for our students, from our earliest learners through those students who get to graduate to whatever comes next for their future. I want to thank you. Please thank this panel for me. Thank you for sharing your expertise. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you so much. The students, oh yeah. If our student journalists could stand one more time, thank you so much for your extemporaneous participation in our last panel. Journalists aren't used to having questions asked of them, and you were all very gracious about that, so thank you for jumping in. Now that we are grounded in what experiential learning can look like for our students when government leaders, community organizations, and educators come together, we have the opportunity to hear from the Honorable Julie Su, Acting U.S. Secretary of Labor, with a video message on transforming the connection between education and work.
Let me say a big thanks to the Albert Shanker Institute, AFT, and CAP for bringing this group together. I want to give a special shout out to my friend and someone I greatly admire, AFT President Randi Weingarten. Randi has been a champion of experiential learning for some time, something I have long believed in because I have seen it work. And we are lucky to have her leadership at the intersection of education and labor, especially right now. Under the Biden-Harris administration, we haven't just seized the moment to make meaningful progress. Right now, we have a real opportunity to make it last. President Biden promised to be the most pro-worker, pro-union president in history, and we are delivering on that promise. And since President Biden took office, nearly 15 million jobs have been created across the country. Sometimes people ask me, are we gonna have workers for all the jobs that we're creating? And the answer is yes, if we make sure every community has access to these jobs. To meet this moment, we have to double down on experiential learning. Learning by doing, hands-on experience, exposure to the actual skills needed for in-demand jobs, good union jobs, and also learning that values the lived experiences of communities that have been left out of opportunity for too long. You know, just a few weeks ago, I visited a pre-apprenticeship program in Oregon. The apprentices said that they had heard of 3D printers, but they didn't really believe they existed until they started to use them in that program. Now, that's great, but in some communities, kids are using 3D printers by 3rd and 4th grade. To meet this moment, we have to address inequity head on. At a time when our economy is growing, and as we create millions of new jobs in communities across the country, we cannot leave the diverse talents of diverse young people untapped. Building an inclusive economy is not just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. So that means expanding and diversifying apprenticeships, not only in the trades, but in technology, manufacturing, engineering, healthcare, teaching, technology, and more. And bringing those opportunities to high schools. That's what our career and technical education programs should do. Open up new career pathways to millions of high school students across the country. And we've been working with the Department of Education to make it seamless for full-time high school and community college students to enroll in a registered apprenticeship before they graduate. We're also doing that through our Apprenticeship Building America grant. As part of that $95 million investment, we've created a category of grants specifically to link high schools and colleges to apprenticeships across industries and careers. We know this works. As President Weingarten likes to say, students have to see it and touch it so that they can be it. So again, let me thank you all for your commitment to this purpose and your passion for helping young people prepare for the future. We will all benefit from the ideas, work, and commitment that come out of this conference. And I'm so glad to have you all as partners in this work.
Such an incredible message from an inspirational leader. Acting Secretary Sue, like Secretary Raimondo before her, has set the stage for exploring national leadership that exists to support and expand experiential learning. And our next panel will talk about that national dashboard. I'd like to welcome our moderator for this discussion, Stanley Litow, professor at Columbia University, trustee at SUNY, the former Vice President of Corporate Citizenship and Corporate Affairs at IBM, former Deputy Schools Chancellor in New York City Public Schools, an esteemed member of the Albert Shanker Board of Directors. And our esteemed panelists, Brendan Danaher, Deputy Director for Labor at the National Economics Council, the Honorable Roel Khanna, U.S. House of Representatives, Michael Mulgrew, President of the United Federation of Teachers, and Randi Weingarten, President of AFT and the Albert Shanker Institute. Take it away, Stan.
Thank you very much, Mary Catherine, and my distinguished panel members. And we're going to have an opportunity to hear from all of them. I'd like to set the stage just a little bit. We've had a great opportunity to hear from a lot of people who are on the front lines as real practitioners, whether we're talking about teachers or people on the union side or former students or people with NGOs, non-governmental organizations. But we're in a critical period of time now in education. We've got a critical problem to recruit and retain top teachers and make sure that they're motivated and supported in the classroom to do their work. We've got a crisis because many of our students are still suffering from COVID, suffering from mental health issues, social services problems, and all kinds of things. As you heard, there's an enrollment issue. And there's, for the first time, some of our high school graduation rates have gone down. And juxtapose that against the labor market And you heard this from Secretary Raimondo and Secretary Sue about the opportunity in the work opportunities that are being generated at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, in semiconductor, in cybersecurity, in advanced manufacturing, in healthcare. So we have to create a more seamless pathway for our young people, from school to college to career. And experiential learning plays a critical role in making that pathway real. It was about 1 year ago this week that a group of people came together at a national summit meeting on pathways from school to college to career. There were CEOs from major companies. There were business leaders from many other companies. There were student leaders, teacher leaders, civil rights organizations, and while many people disagree on a lot of education issues, there was a coming together about the need to break down the silos between school, college, and career and create a more seamless pathway so that young people, more young people, and a diverse range of young people can take advantage of the opportunities that exist. And that summit brought together Democrat governors, Republican governors, cabinet leaders across the United States. And that has led us, now 1 year later, to this convening to talk about experiential learning, not only from the examples of success, but how we bring them to scale, how we make them sustainable, how we break down the barriers that exist, and we heard a little bit about it before. There might be a financial barrier, there might be a structural barrier, but there's lots of opportunity if we all come together and break down the silos between all the various key stakeholders and get people working on the same page. So we've got a great panel of leaders. Randi Weingarten, as you've heard many, many times from so many people, the head of the AFT, and Randi and I had the opportunity when I was Deputy Chancellor to work across the table negotiating contracts, and what we found out is it's okay to disagree, but there's also an opportunity to agree. And there's an opportunity to work collaboratively and make real change. Michael Mulgrew, the head of the United Federation of Teachers, also somebody who has deep experience in career and technical education, understands these issues from the ground up, and is now prepared to help make real change happen at the leadership level in the city of New York. Khanna, a great leader in Congress, somebody who has demonstrated that you can actually get things done, reach across the aisle, and create real progress on some of the issues that we're talking about today. And Brendan from the National Economic Council, and somebody who is working on the national level, and I will say also I just found out it was a student at Columbia University School of International and Public Affairs where I teach, so he can tell me later on whether or not I'm getting it right or whether I'm getting it wrong. So let me start off with you, Brendan. When we talk about getting these things done at the system level, making them scalable, how do we move forward and make the kinds of changes that people are talking about?
Well, first of all, it's just really exciting to be here. Thank you for the intro, and thank you to Randi for bringing us all together. We are at the Biden-Harris administration committed to finding new pathways to good jobs through experiential learning and ensuring that those jobs in the America of the future are available to everyone. You know, Acting Secretary Sue talked about equitable pathways to work, and that defines so much of the work that we are doing. And, you know, in a time and in an economy where the demands for jobs are such, where unemployment is such that we can't just go to the well in the same way and look at the same workers to try and recruit, What this administration is doing is ensuring that we are fighting to create new pathways and really ensure that the legacy that we leave behind is a workforce of the future that is far more diverse in every way possible. And so if we think about that within the context of this administration, you know, you may all have heard the president say it many times. He is focused on building the economy from the middle out and the bottom up. And so that's a lot of what experiential learning is doing. So let's talk about a couple of specifics. We recently, last year, announced 5 workforce hubs. These are hubs around the Investing in America agenda, around chips, you know, new manufacturing for microchips. The IIA program also includes the bipartisan infrastructure law, which is building new infrastructure, and then the Inflation Reduction Act around building a new green economy. For each of those, we need highly skilled workers in construction and manufacturing and in a variety of other skilled trades and skilled occupations. But that's not going to happen naturally. So we have 5 hubs that I would encourage you to each look at, leaving this room, leaving the conference, and think through the ways in which we are working to model experiential learning in each of them. I'll give 2 quick examples. One, in Baltimore, the bipartisan infrastructure law is funding a tunnel for Amtrak. And so what we've done there is work with state and local partners, local philanthropies, and local schools in Baltimore to ensure that the jobs that are created out of that project include a partnership between the building trades unions and the city schools to create highly skilled and well-paid, safe jobs for building trades in the future. In Phoenix, we are looking to build the microchip industry. And so there have been partnerships that were recently just announced between West MEC and the Phoenix Public City Schools and microchip companies in Phoenix to ensure that the skilled work that's being done to create that microchip industry and manufacture those microchips include experiential learning that is focused on diverse pathways for a variety of students in those areas. Just a couple of ideas of some of the work that we're doing and some models that we're trying to drive.
Thank you so much, Brendan. And now, Congressman Khanna, talk a little bit about what we're doing at the federal level and how the Congress has put in place some of these initiatives that are so critically important. Khanna.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. The name is, you were close enough. It was close enough. And I appreciate it very much, Stan. And I appreciate, Randy, your convening us. And look, I agree that President Biden has sort of reversed 40 years of the hollowing out of jobs, manufacturing in this country. And I'll just start very briefly with an anecdote. I was back home in California, and I was talking to someone who was a very successful tech executive. And he was going to his 50-year high school reunion in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And he went to his 50th high school reunion, and there he met all of his high school former classmates. Not a single one, other than him, had done better than their parents. Not a single one of their kids today expects to do better than they do. So when people ask me, well, why with all these economic numbers is there this anxiety? The anxiety is over the declining opportunity of the American dream. And there's only so much the president can do in 3 years. This is why we need him for another 4 years, because he's trying to reverse something. He's trying to reverse something structural. We have gone from 50th rank in income inequality to 128th. China is 77, Britain is 30th, Canada, UK, I mean, we have had all this wealth increase in places like my district. So what the Congress said, what this president said is, we can't just have the concentration of economic opportunity in a few places. We can't have this extraordinary disparity where we spent 400 to 1 on higher education versus technical and vocational education, 400 to 1 in terms of the disparity. We've got to really focus in the infrastructure bill, in the CHIPS and Science Act, in the Inflation Reduction Act, in creating jobs in places that have been deindustrialized, that have been left out of the modern economy. And we've got to partner with people like Randi and the private sector to get folks credentialed in those jobs, and that we're going to make those good paying jobs. And I believe that the president has made tremendous progress in doing that. And now it's up to us to figure out how do we scale it and how do we tell these stories in these communities.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Now, as we're talking about it at the local level, Michael Mulgrew, in a fairly significant city like New York, what are some of the kinds of things that are happening at the local level that you take pride in, and what are the areas that you think we could do a whole lot better in?
Thank you, Stan, and again, thank you to my sister Randi for bringing us here. I agree with everything everyone said, but the question you asked is, how do we scale this, and how do we make it so it's easier for our education systems across the country to move in this direction? So we spend a lot of time on career and tech ed in New York City. We've grown our programs where 130,000 children are in them. They graduate at 91%. They graduate at a higher rate than the academic schools. We know all of that. But if we're going to change in this direction, we should not repeat the mistakes we've made from the past. So if we want to move in this direction, I completely agree with that, then how do we make it so it's easily accessible to each school district, to each state education department, that we are not making everyone recreate the entire thing? So you have economic development money, workforce development money, and Perkins money. Right? Those are the three main drivers. So I'll just give an example. We've been doing a lot of work on chip manufacturing. And when we first started to go into this, we went to the schools who were preparing in Syracuse, New York, and they were basically replicating the college programs for the high-end engineering jobs. And everyone thought that's what we needed to do for chips manufacturing, the high-end engineering jobs. So we convened a group of teachers, CTE teachers, and we had them meet with HR directors from chip companies. And they came back and they said, we're way off the mark. 95% of the jobs in this industry are not high-end engineering jobs, yet that's the only thing people are preparing for. So what are we going to do to prepare all of our students? Because we take that sacredly, like we're preparing you for something that's real, because students want relevance. So we said, let's just do it on our own. They continued to work with the HR directors. They found all of the different jobs, and they started breaking down what is called a framework. The teachers developed it themselves. They developed a framework working with people from the chip industry. Everyone in the end, it took about 6 months, put a stamp of approval on it, and we handed it to our state education department. We said, any school district that wants to start needs to use this. We don't want them to have to do the same work. So are we going to use basically an open source system, or are we going to say we're going to use our money and that I'm all for companies making money, but are we going to, the education companies, are they going to start pre-packaging the stuff that we're developing and then making each school district and school pay for it? So this is a real conversation we have to have at the policy level. Because education dollars are finite, and schools are being asked to do more and more. We're basically the social safety net, which is not what we were designed to do, but we have taken that role on because the children are ours, but it's a finite number of dollars. So when we're talking about a policy shift across the entire country, let's have a real conversation. I'm all for bringing people together to develop these programs with industry, but make it open source. And then we can then develop the pieces on, if you're going to do this, here's the support, here's the professional development you need to do with your teachers. This is what a basic lab should look like, or a shop room, whatever you want to call it, and we can set those things up. But it shouldn't, if we're going to make this change, you cannot make every school district in the United States figure it out on their own. And I would say that's what we have to do to change this.
Thank you, Michael. Now, Randy, take it from the New York City and New York State level to the national level, working with our teacher organizations around the United States. What are the kinds of things that we could do and support to get from examples of success to scale and sustainability?
So, number one, I just want to also say, let me say that who's in the room right now? You have state union heads from New York, from Ohio, from Texas, from Michigan, our union, here because we are all trying to figure out how to do what Michael just laid out. And what Secretary Raimondo laid out about Micron, the fact that we had people from New York City. Think about this. Those teachers from New York City and from other places in New York State that have developed these frameworks, if they actually decided that it was their personal property, they would have made a lot of money. But what they did was say, this is our work for students. This is our work for students. And they've created this framework. And so what's happened is in New York State, and Melinda Person is here, who's the head of the, just wave, Melinda, head of the New York State United Teachers, there's 10 districts, not just one, like in Phoenix, love the Phoenix example, but there's 10 districts, including Watertown, Niagara Falls, New York City, the Syracuse districts, who are all now working with Micron so that this pipeline happens for all of these jobs from high school through, some are going to go to community college, Onondaga Community College is part of it too, through all the technical jobs, Micron. The professional engineering union is in this room too right now. They're working with us on all, just raise your hand. Gay, yes, thank you. They're working with us on this. The PTA is in this room, Skills USA is in this room. The point is this, we are so fractionalized, and Ro just said it, sorry, the congressman just said it. We are so fractionalized in education that the default position is, thank God for Amy, we'll get a couple of grants from Perkins to go to a school district. That school district will try to figure out how to do it. We, Michael, you just heard it, will try to pull together, because of his presence in New York, the business folks and others, and we'll try to create a pipeline. All of this is a ridiculous waste of time when you have this huge opportunity with a broken manufacturing, with a broken economic system that the president is solving. This should be part of the just transition and should be monetized and should be incorporated in policy. So when we have those 5 hubs, this should be part of the policy making going forward. That one of the policy objectives should be this kind of workplace learning that Michael just talked about should be the norm, not the exception. And it should not be an add-on, but it should be part of what happens for every one of those workforce development and economic development teams. And so if we did that, and you heard from the earlier panel, teachers are really into this. But every one of those teachers were driving it like Michael just said. So we have to shift policy. We have enough ideas about how this strategy works. So we have to shift policy so it's not 1 to 400. We have to shift policy so whether it comes as part and parcel of Perkins or workforce development or commerce or any of these other things, the training money, going back to what Raphael said earlier, the kind of working together money has to be part and parcel of this. And then I would also add that success looks like every single, well, maybe not say that, 25% of kids all throughout the country should have the opportunity, actually, let me be broader, 100% of the kids should have the opportunity to choose from high school on college, career, or both. And so that means that we are flipping the script, and instead of it being kids leaving high school and having to figure out all these other things around them, let businesses, as well as colleges, come to high school and have to basically compete for young adults. And so that is what we're trying to do by creating these strategies in advanced manufacturing, in healthcare, in other places. But we have to flip the script, and policy that is actually being worked on in the White House is trying to do that. But you see from what Michael said, we can operationalize it at the ground level.
That's great. Now let's, moving back down from you to this side of the aisle, do you think that teachers know enough about, or what could we do differently to explain more to them about what is happening in the workplace and what the needs are? Because when we talk to employers, they talk about the need for problem solving, collaboration, presentation, writing skills, and though we're not talking about a specific industry skill set, we're talking about a broader, some people call them soft skills. I would refer to them as essential skills because they're actually being effective in the workplace. What could we do to help our teachers understand more about the workplace so that they could integrate that into the education experience? Randy, you start and then we'll move to Michael.
This may be the most controversial thing I say today. You have to change the accountability system. You have to change ESSA because the accountability system has to be based on what kids need to know and be able to do in the 21st century to have this just transition. You can't have an accountability system that's based on something from the 1950s or 60s or 70s when we're talking about this right now. And we have that opportunity because ESSA is up, just like Perkins is up next year after the election. It has to get changed. You heard that panel before us talk about experiential learning. You just heard this.
Yes. Thank you. Michael?
I'll just put it this way. Randy's 100%. The accountability system drives instruction, okay? You want to move to an experiential instructional methodology. Your accountability system tells you not to do it. So you got a problem. So as a teacher, we're laughing at you, everybody. Yes, we hear about, experiential learning means a child has an experience when they're learning a unit, and they are actually see the relevance in it, and actually helps teacher retention. Teachers like it. They see the joy that they got into the profession for. It's the whole thing. But if you're telling the school system, everything, the only thing that matters as far as we're concerned is your test scores, you're not going to have any joy. And the teachers don't have joy, the children don't have joy. The whole thing is about we have to stop everything and we have to get good test scores, and therefore that's the only thing that matters in education. You're teaching children how to become very angry about society because children are not stupid. And they get that once a year everything stops, and a month before they get nothing except teaching to the test, and they get it. They understand that the adults are stupid. There's no other simple, it's the simplest way to put it. I talk to them all the time. They crack up, they laugh, they said, oh, it's game time. We all got to act like we are going to do everything but all we have to worry about is the test. Change the accountability system is the only way that teachers will say, yes, we agree with you, but your accountability system tells us not to.
It's interesting because you talk about, engaging teachers in a more effective way. It's not just students that need internships. It's teachers who also need.
And we're not against tests. Somebody took our tool from us and weaponized it.
Right.
That was our tool. And now it's a horrible thing. It's our tool. We believe in tests. That's how we assess and we check our students going through a unit. That's the only way to do it. But you took it away from us. Somebody took it away from us.
Congressman?
Not you guys, sorry.
I could just flip your question. It's not just what teachers need to learn from corporate America, but how about what corporate America needs to learn from teachers? As a representative of Silicon Valley, you know what, and I want to make this point, because teachers aren't just job prep. You know what I learned from my teachers? Citizenship. How about that in terms of becoming a strong country?
Right.
And to think that it's just about, you know, preparing people for jobs. There's so many other issues around this country. So I want to first just make sure we're understanding the role and valuing of public teachers and what they bring to our democracy. But the second point, I think, is if I were one of those parents in Fort Wayne that has seen 40 years of this country hollow out manufacturing, that has seen all those jobs disappear, that has seen my district have $10 trillion of value, that have seen economists preach that it doesn't matter if we lose a manufacturing job, we'll pick up a data science job in Palo Alto, that has seen Wall Street become wealthy. I would have the same thing to my kids, saying that the only way to achieve the American dream is if you go to college. That's because of the policies of this country. It's not just, so how do we change that? We've got to do what this president is doing. We've got to bring some of those manufacturing jobs back. We've got to recognize that for 40 years we had a mistake in what the pathway to the American dream was. I often say, look, would we as a country ever say we don't need Wall Street, let London do all the finance? Would we say we don't need Hollywood, let Bollywood make all the movies? Yet somehow we said we didn't need a lot of these industry jobs. And then I think to say that these jobs are, like the digital trades and others, are the jobs of the future, that they're jobs that are good paying and be collaborative in the approach with teachers and the private sector to do it. That would be my view.
That's great. Absolutely. Now, Brendan, with all of the changes that we've seen at the federal level, some massive amounts of investment in the critical areas that will deal with the skills crisis and preparation of the workforce of the future, what would progress look like a year, 2, 3 years from now? Obviously, we would love to get in 10 years or 20 years, but people are going to want to know what have we been able to achieve in a shorter period of time. What would you like to see 1 to 3 years from now?
So that's a great question. I think progress in the near term is going to have several different attributes and really reflect the values of so much of what we're talking about here. Providing teachers the tools that they need in order to do great work and in the important work that they do. That means ensuring that you're able to access curricula from upstate New York and Syracuse and across the state where there is great models for experiential learning, and so that you don't have to start from scratch, but you can build on the experience that's already happened. I think it would mean that the jobs that are being filled are being done through equitable pathways so that the workers of the future have great jobs and the workforce is far more diverse. And finally, I would say that they all are imbued with the value of a voice at work, that there is an essential aspect to any good job that involves labor management partnerships or education of any kind, that the workers bring wisdom and experience to that work, whether those workers are teachers, whether they are construction workers, or whether they are doing advanced manufacturing or anything else, that their voice plays an essential role in creating a better economy for the future and in building a better education for the future, an education system, and also building more profitable companies here at home.
Thank you so much. I want to thank our incredible panel for not only outlining all of the solutions to the problem, but doing it exactly on time. I can't believe it. Thank you so much.
Well, to reach all students in all communities, national leadership like that is imperative. And in addition to our previous morning's outstanding panelists, the Honorable Miguel Cardona, U.S. Secretary of Education, offers leadership and experience and a deep commitment to every student in every community. I am pleased to welcome his video message on the experiential imperative.
Thank you, Mary Catherine Ricker, for that introduction, and more importantly, for your leadership. When you and I were the state education chiefs, we saw eye to eye on the importance of experiential learning, career and technical education, and preparing our students well for the future. So I'm really excited about what you're doing at the Schenker Institute. I'm speaking to you today as a proud graduate of Wilcox, a technical high school in Meriden, Connecticut, where I studied automotive technology. I'd spend 3 weeks in classes and then 3 weeks in the auto shop, getting my hands dirty, taking things apart, putting them back together, and figuring out how things worked. I was learning by doing. Let me tell you, it felt amazing. It helped me think critically. It showed me that I had the potential to solve problems, fix things, make things happen, work with people that were a little bit different than me. Now, there are some people out there who'll say that when we push for more of this in our schools, we're driving students toward careers or reducing their school experience to being widgets in the economy. That's wrong. Couldn't be more wrong. I, for one, didn't end up going into automotive, but I did graduate with more options. Whether it was getting a job right away or going to 2-year or 4-year school, I used my skills as a springboard for my passion, not to mention, as Secretary of Education, having to reopen school, I had to work with people that were different than me. A lot of those experiences I got in my career technical education in my technical high school. More options for more students, so they have more confidence in themselves and in their futures. That's really what experiential learning is all about. It's also about reaching the students who aren't feeling engaged in schools, who are asking the age-old question, why am I learning this? For far too long, disengaged students have been sort of a missing middle in how we think about education. Stuck between a societal focus on both the most highly resourced, highest achieving students and the most disadvantaged students. The thinking you're doing today on hands-on experiential learning will go a long way toward challenging that. Let me tell you, some of the best instruction I've seen as Secretary of Education across the country has been as a part of a CTE program or experiential learning. Quite frankly, it's just the best pedagogy. You've talked not only about the possibilities of CTE, but also the arts, music, civics to keep the students engaged, to prepare them for a better future, to connect their passions with purpose. Not only that, experiential learning has to be front and center as we defend public education against those who are trying to defund it. Because when we get experiential learning right in our classrooms, we demonstrate that our public schools are doing the things that keep our students engaged and prepared for the future. When public education is strong, our nation is strong. And let me also emphasize this. Experiential learning is also about defending our democracy by engaging and preparing the next generation of leaders. At its best, that's exactly what experiential learning encourages in our students early on. So I applaud all of you today for making experiential learning the top priority it deserves to be. I'm looking forward to hearing about your ideas, and I wish you the best for the rest of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you. I am grateful for Secretary Cardona's leadership, especially the point he made about when are we going to learn this, because students in experiential learning environments are too busy actually learning it to ask, when are we ever going to use this? So we've heard from educators and leaders in the community. We have heard from talented national leaders in government and in unions. How do these exciting partnerships for our students, our communities, and our economy start? How do they work? I am so excited for you to hear from our next panel. These leaders in business are actively creating opportunities for students, our community, and our economy. We have a lot to learn from their experiences and their expertise. First, I'd like to welcome back our moderator, Stanley Littau. And then joining him, I would like to welcome David Etzweiler, the CEO of the Siemens Foundation, Allison Knox, the Director of Education Policy and Programs at the Microsoft Corporation, Bo Macheo, the Director of U.S. Government and Public Affairs at Micron, and I would like to welcome Michael Mulgrew, President of the United Federation of Teachers, back to the stage. Stan, the stage is yours.
Mary Catherine, thank you very much. So as some of you knew when you read a little bit about my bio, in addition to working very much in city government in New York City and as deputy schools chancellor, I had the opportunity to spend a fair amount of my professional life working for a large company. And a lot of people, when we're looking at this skills crisis, must understand that the private sector is going to play a critical role here in creating the kind of pipeline and pathway that more young people can find a real career opportunity and address the economic and societal challenges of the workplace needs that lead to a resounding and sound economy. There's lots of examples where the private sector has not behaved properly, and we can go back decades. On the other hand, there are many examples where the private sector has really led, in many instances, long before legislation or regulation required it. It was 1870 that a U.S. company, Macy's, established the first free health care program for all of its employees. 1870. It was 1875 that American Express established the first pension plan in the United States of America. Nobody regulated it, nobody legislated it. It was a company effort because they thought it would be the right thing to do to improve productivity in their workplace. The first decade of the 20th century, from 1900 to 1910, 500 U.S. companies provided 1 week of paid vacation. In that decade, there wasn't one state in the United States that offered a week of vacation. And companies have established apprenticeship programs. Companies have partnered with colleges, high schools. They've done what they can, and now is the opportunity, because the challenge is so great and the bar has been raised, to see real progress, and we're going to need that leadership and initiative coming from the private sector. But it can't be done in a silo. It has to be done in collaboration and partnership with our educators and our teachers, and that's why we've got a panel that's going to represent this picture. So let me start with you. From Siemens Foundation standpoint, what are the kinds of things that the company is doing right now that you're most proud of, and what would you like to see going forward?
Yeah, thank you, Stan, and great to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. You know, just to tag on to your comments, I mean, I think one of the things that we're most enthusiastic about right now is what you're talking about, which is we are focused on equity in the Siemens Foundation. That's what we're here to close the gap between income and wealth disparities, and we've done that for a good 10 years. We've been focused on workforce learning, been focused on health equity, and we're increasingly focused on the green economy and the intertwining of all of those. The thing that actually makes me the most excited about the work that we're talking about today and engaged in is the fact that we're no longer dependent on folks who aren't in this room who maybe don't care as much about equity as we do, right? The fact of the matter is you can have a cold stone heart on equity right now, and we talk to these folks and say, we don't get our economic objectives, we don't get our climate objectives, we don't get our national security objectives accomplished unless all of us are in this together. So those of us who have been fighting this fight for equity for years continue that on. On the other hand, the economy cannot exist given the demographics, cannot achieve its goals and objectives going forward unless everybody gets on board. And so it's fun to see what's happening across the country right now. So the question is really sort of what are the things that we're learning from our partners? One of the things I would highlight in that question is the fact that these partnerships are becoming more sophisticated, they're becoming broader, and they're becoming less politicized, right? So we're seeing a number of states, and we've identified them in the work that we're doing, who are marching out ahead of others and setting the bar for others because they are committed to creating coalitions of educators, of labor, of policymakers, of business, and they're about that, right? They're taking that seriously. They're putting aside their differences and figuring out how they get stuff done. So we're doing some work with the North Carolina Business Coalition for Education would be one group I would highlight that we're doing some work with in the electric vehicle training space. That's a very sophisticated coalition. They've been in the governor's office for 40 years, and they're wonderful at mapping out where are the needs of marginalized communities, where are the jobs coming from, how do we match that up with local high school pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs, how do we work with CTE, how do we work with community colleges, et cetera. It's a different level of sophistication than I think most of us have seen in the past, and it's by necessity in addition to desire. Right at this point. The other point that I would make is in terms of the sophistication is the commitment to best practices these days. So we work with a number of funders at the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship at New America. This is a group that several years ago really mapped out a blueprint for how to capture best practices in apprenticeship, how to provide technical assistance to various states and cities and regions. But the level of sophistication and the observance of that, but for those of us at the table, it includes Gates and Carnegie and JP Morgan Chase and Lumina and many others. It's a very different phone call that comes in from regions and states these days because all of that best practice is there on the shelf. It's being talked about, technical assistance can be provided. And the final note that I would say is best practices in terms of communications. So we've made grants to advance CTE, for example, to really bear down and do focus groups with students, with educators, with policymakers, with parents as well, to understand what's the best way to talk about this kind of work-based learning. And folks are paying attention to that, right? It's a different dialogue that you have with a student than you do with a parent. So being able to refer back to those best practices, add to them, and keep the momentum going, I think is a big part of what we've seen as well.
Great, thank you so much. Now, Allison, from Microsoft's standpoint, you've got a crisis in terms of finding people with the right talent and keeping them loyal employees at Microsoft. What are some of the kinds of things that Microsoft is doing that you're most proud of?
Well, thank you. And I just want to start by saying how honored we are as a company to be here. Thank you, AFT, for inviting us and all the organizers. I also want to say for a second, this is one of the most beautiful historic buildings in Washington, D.C., and it's honored for me to be on this stage. I just want to start with that. And also, the students who are journalists here today talk about experiential education. Like, you're doing it today. So if we can be helpful, just let us know. I think the whole panel would agree with me. I just signed you all up.
I echo everything.
I took a little time to read about Albert Schenker before I came. And I was really struck by the 3 principles of the Institute. So I thought I'd start there. One that it stands for is a vibrant democracy. 2 is a quality public education for all. And 3, a voice for working people. And I'm inspired that those principles are playing out today and that my company, Microsoft, stands with those principles. That 3rd one, a voice for working people, we've been leaning into quite a bit. Last December, we launched a new partnership with the AFL-CIO. I'm glad that got an applause. And we're really excited by the work. It builds on our neutrality principles at the company, which say that all workers have a fundamental right to organize. So that's where it grew from. But it started to look at, in this day of AI, how can we make AI work for workers? And so we are very focused on building a new way to communicate with workers to make sure that AI is meeting their needs. We're going to be bringing more skilling opportunities in AI to workers. Obviously, the largest union within the AFL-CIO is AFT, led by the amazing Randi Weingarten. And so we have been talking every week with AFT leaders to make sure that we can take these big ideas of the partnership and put them into play with teachers. So how do we bring AI skilling opportunities to teachers? How do we bring our products, our education products to teachers and actually listen to teachers and maybe redefine or reshape our products a bit to meet teacher needs. And this is all, again, in that spirit of the larger partnership. There is no question, though, that we have been doing this work, this partnership work, for many, many years. I feel a little bit old up here. I've been with the company almost 20 years. We've launched many different partnerships in the education space. And I'm just going to highlight two, because the two that I want to highlight talk about the program impact, but the scale part of the question that you brought up. So the first really addressed the issue of the fact that only 57% of our high schools offer computer science education to students. And so we launched a program called TEALS. TEALS has operated over 10 years in 1,300 school districts. It's reached 100,000 students, and it pairs an industry professional with a teacher, and they co-teach computer science over the school year. I would say that the 7,000 different technical volunteers who have been in those classrooms, either remotely or in person, and those teachers have taught us so much about public education and about what it means to a teacher to bring both professionals into the classroom, but also to take the students at times into career opportunities, into communities, which is what this conference is all about. So that's the first one. The first one also we got to scale by really linking arms with all kinds of organizations across the United States to advocate, to use our political currency to get computer science to count as a high school graduation credit toward math or science. And when we started, there were only 13 states 10 years ago that counted it. And I'm so happy that with everybody else, it was a collective effort, today it's 50 states. So that's, for us, programmatic. Oh, I love this. 4 applauses. I can't wait. I can't wait to go back to the company and say, we got 4. No, that is scale. Okay, that's one example. The second example, and I'll be really quick because I know my friend from Micron needs to go next, has to do with rural students and the issue about, the big problem of food insecurity and climate change. And so we partnered with a group, the Future Farmers of America, which is operating in high schools and CTE programs throughout our country. And over 5 years, we've developed this curriculum with them that really looks at how do we take technology and precision agriculture and bring it to the classroom? So we have created something called Farm Beats for students. The curriculum is free, and what it does is help students with sensors monitor plant health, but that sensor now can communicate with their laptop or a computer, and the data that's collected, they can manipulate it. They can even bring AI to that opportunity on their screen. It is new. I have kits that you can check out because the microbits are so cool to look at. So for any of the students, I'm happy to show it to you. Why is this important, though, for scale as well? Rural students, and I've listened to Randi Weingarten talk about how important rural students are today and rural teachers. We want to take this Farm Beats opportunity, the curriculum, the way that it meets standards, the way that it already operates in CTE schools, the way that it partners already with Future Farmers of America, and we just want to lift it up as a technology company. That's another way of achieving scale. So we're really excited about experiential education. I know that for me, it's my transferable skill. It's the way I learned about lifelong learning, and I know for so many of you it's the same. And so we're just honored again to be here and to be part of a chorus saying how important it is. Thanks.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you very much. Now, Bo, several of our speakers have referenced what Micron is doing around the semiconductor industry and the major investment that the company is making and the major investment that the government is making. We had an opportunity to meet each other at an announcement of the Micron program at Onondaga Community College and talking about the promise of hiring over 9,000 people and collaborating and partnering with the schools and the community colleges. Micron is going to be opening a P-Tech school. We had a P-Tech student on an earlier panel talking about the value of the program, and that's something that Micron is doing. So give our audience a little bit more about the flavor of what Micron is doing, what Micron proposes to do in the future, and what will be the benefit for the semiconductor industry.
Yeah, well, thank you for the question, and it's a pleasure seeing you all, and it's great to be on this panel. Thank you, Randy, Beth, Michael. It's always a pleasure to partner with AFT and UFT, and looking forward to what Micron's doing in the U.S. Like you mentioned, Micron is the second largest semiconductor company in all of the U.S. and the fourth in the world. We're the only U.S. company that manufactures memory. And so when you talk about AI, when you talk about storage, when you go in and out of your app on your phone, that is a memory chip. And so thanks to the CHIPS and Science Act, Micron has announced two major investments in the U.S. so far. One is an investment in Boise, Idaho, which is where our headquarters is right now. We will co-locate our leading edge research and development with leading edge memory manufacturing, creating 2,000 direct jobs at Micron and 17,000 jobs throughout all of Boise. And then in New York, we'll be building a mega fab with four large fabs, over $100 billion in investment, 9,000 direct jobs, and over 50,000 jobs in the U.S. And so we know for economic and national security, it's essential to be building these chips right here in the U.S. And to be able to attract and retain the workforce that's needed, we need to partner with organizations across the U.S. to be able to do so and be able to have the talent that we need to not only maintain technology leadership over companies in Asia and here in the U.S., but also to be able to make sure that we're providing good paying jobs for Americans and folks in this country. And so we've had the honor and privilege of, I'll use New York as an example. We have a $500 million community investment fund. It's the one of its kind. We've since replicated that exact same fund to do a $75 million fund in Boise, Idaho, but it's to ensure that we have underrepresented and underserved folks, and that everybody in these communities are a part of what is going to happen in central New York and in upstate New York. And we know that that means that it needs to be an all-hands-on approach. It doesn't mean that Micron can do it alone. We need partners to be able to do this work. And we also need to hold ourselves to a level of standard and a commitment to be able to make sure that we are meeting our goals to ensure that our workforce reflects and looks like the community, but also reflects and looks like all of the United States. And so we have had a privilege of, at the end of last year, alongside of Governor Hochul and Senator Schumer and Randy, announcing a $4 million partnership with our educators. We know that one thing my mom used to always tell me is you can't know what you don't see. And so our educators actually are the ones who will be able to, train and equip based off of the curriculum that's developed folks to be able to be technicians and or engineers to work at Micron. About 50% of the jobs that we have, we know will be for engineers, but 50% of those jobs actually don't even require, at some point they require 2-year degrees, but some of them don't. And those are jobs that pay over $100,000. And so our opportunity to partner with folks like AFT to be able to make sure that we we're training and equipping the next generation of students to be able to work at Micron is critically important to the success of our company. We also have made commitments from a building and trades perspective. We signed the largest PLA in U.S. history in New York. There will be over 10,000 construction workers that work at our fabs in Boise and in New York. And those aren't just, sometimes folks think about construction jobs as kind of one-off, but for the semiconductor industry, you always need to retool and be constructing on an ongoing basis. And our project in New York is 20 plus years. And so those aren't just jobs, but those are careers for folks. And so we know that partnering with unions especially give us the best ability to not only train from a student perspective with our educators, but give us a strategic advantage to be able to ensure that we're getting the best workforce possible. And so we're proud to have signed that PLA and also have signed one also in Idaho as well. And so we're really looking forward to continuing to work with folks in this room as we continue to do that. And then one more thing I'd like to say is that through our community investment fund of $500 million that we're pledging to invest into the community, we've also made strategic commitments to make sure it's not only our direct workforce that's going to be a benefit. We've committed to building childcare facilities for our workers on site for both our workforce in Boise and in Central New York, but then also have made investments up to $500,000 to the YMCA in both localities to say, okay, we know that this is not, we need to address the need for childcare for our own workforce, but we know that we'll have construction workforce and the other induced jobs for the supply chain, those need investments as well. We've also made sure that in our contracts that we ensure that diverse suppliers, both people of color and women-owned businesses, have the ability to participate in as suppliers. And so we've written into our contracts that 30% of all of our ongoing construction spend will be needs to be minority and women-owned businesses, and that 20% of all of our ongoing spend will also need to be with minorities and women-owned businesses. And that, I think, allows for folks who have not historically been participating in this industry, that is one that America will continue to show leadership in, have that opportunity to do so. And so it's not only about just us partnering, but how do we ensure that there's scale in that, and partnering with organizations, again, like those in this room with states and with the U.S. government is our example of how to be able to do so. So looking forward to the conversation.
Bo, thank you very much.
Sorry.
And these are just 3 examples of companies: Siemens, Microsoft, Micron, and it's not just tech companies. It's healthcare, it's in the green jobs area. But you've heard from the 3 speakers on the business side. In collaboration and partnership, you have to reach out and work education effectively with teachers. So, Michael, you've had an opportunity to work collaboratively in New York City with a number of different company efforts. Talk a little bit about that collaboration and partnership going forward.
It's been an interesting journey, to say the least. I bridged the get rid of all vocational ed, workforce development policy, basically, a strategy that most school districts did about 25 years ago, then slowly helped develop CTE in New York City. I've negotiated, I don't know, hundreds of agreements between private industry and schools. At first, it was more about what can we do to help each other. It was a group of teachers who really led that movement. The teachers' philosophy was not to create workers for industries. The philosophy was this style of learning will allow us to get more children to graduate on time. So I want to be clear, when you hear about this, when people talk about CTE, it is a workforce development, but for us as educators, it is what we consider to be the most effective tool in instruction in building a relationship with the student and getting the student to really start thinking about their responsibility in life and building them as an individual. And if whatever the industry is, if we know that that is going to help us engage our students and get them where we want them to be, which is graduation on time and more options than they would have, they have now instead of less options. So when it came to industry partnerships, we went through the whole myriad of, from in the beginning, people didn't know what to do. Industry was very suspect of the education systems. Because at that point, education systems really wasn't doing this work. It has grown. We went through a phase where we would have a bunch of different industry partners come to us, but we also know that they were trying to get tax breaks and credits from the state and federal government, and they were trying to use and just put a little, they just wanted to put the cherry on top and not really do the real work, right? So we kind of have pushed through all of that. I was very happy when, our leader in commerce, Gina Raimondo, I thought it was spectacular the morning. I picked up the Times and I read how there were some in industry who were furious about all the strings she attached in the CHIPS Act. Furious that she said, you need to do childcare. You need to work with the local schools. You have to have a real workforce development plan, not just some, oh, we're going to train some people at higher ed and that's it. Because that's, all the conversations we were having, that's what it has to be about. So, but we also feel very strongly, we have a sacred responsibility to our students that if we have a company working with them, that the company has to live up to their end of the agreement. And we're seeing that more and more now. Companies saying, all right, we get this. How can we help? Let's have a real conversation. But it's hard at times because they're coming at it from a business perspective, a public relations perspective, and we're coming at it from, we're afraid, because this is what we hear. We heard it here today. People are afraid that companies are coming to us and trying to create widgets, which the teachers themselves, the educators are going to say, you can't do that. But we have so many more partners now that really get this and want to make our country a better place. So it is difficult, but you have to make sure you're vetting it properly, and then you have to have that long-term commitment. So any one of their industries, we know we have to change that curriculum every 3 years, right? And it can't just be teachers doing that research on their own. There has to be a cycle built in. We're doing this, that the internships are actually being fulfilled and those things are happening, and that we have real people inside of their companies who are relating to us on a daily basis if there are issues. See, it's a real responsibility when it comes to if a company wants to do this work and doing it with a group of educators, because we're the ones with the children every day, and we want to make sure that they're getting the best out of this program. And that's why, these folks here on the stage, they have been, they have a track record of having that type of relationship with the schools. And we have to continue to push it that way, because that's the only way we're going to actually grow what we want for our country, which is great citizens, well-educated, and all have massive opportunities that they have done on their own because we supplied them the correct education.
Thank you very much, Michael. So now we've got about 2.5 minutes left in our panel, and I'm going to ask each of you if there's a message, one message going forward that you would like to tell the audience that you're planning to do going forward to build on the success that you've already established.
Yeah, well, I love the conversation about the supports that families need, right, around training and whatnot. And that's not announced yet. Soon to be, we're working with the Family and Workers Fund really to address a number of those supports, childcare, housing, transportation, a number of other needs in the workforce training space. And the hope in that is to develop a national fund to help with that. That's a huge piece of this that I think folks have overlooked in the first couple of years or the first year and a half or so of this legislation, but there's a lot more chatter now and a lot more understanding that these are not just sort of pedestrian needs on the side. These are central to improving the lives of folks, particularly from marginalized communities.
Thank you. Allison.
I think I'm going to go back to Albert Schenker's 3 principles of his institute, the quality education for all, making sure that all workers have a voice, and making sure that we all stand for a vibrant democracy, which kind of speaks to some of the general ideas of what students should. You were talking about full citizenship and how experiential learning can get them there. And I guess part of what I'm hoping the private sector does differently moving forward, or we're starting to learn differently, I guess, is listening to the worker in a new way, especially in the age of AI. And we need to be almost, I think, inspired and educated to do that in a different way, and I think we're trying to. And the other is to not sell ourselves short for what collective action can do in terms of policy and legislation. When I brought up the 13 states only gave students credit, and now 50 states gives those students credit, part of it was the power of people coming together, public and private sector, and going state to state and building coalitions and making the case and watching people say, this is the right direction, let's make something new happen together. And I would love to see that kind of collective action in this philosophical terrain of education, which is experiential education. I don't think anybody disagrees about the power or the value. The question is, what can we do together to really make it deeper and more maybe supported?
Thank you, Allison. Bo?
Yeah, I think you've seen, I think the last panel talked about it, this Invest in America agenda that's happening and the expansion from a manufacturing perspective that's happening with all of our 3 respective industries. And really, the partnership allows for scalability. And so from a private sector perspective, I'm really excited. We are going to release in the next couple of months what we're calling a community priorities document, which included over 100 listening sessions with folks on the ground across New York that will actually provide guidance for how we actually spend our $500 million in New York, for example. And so I think that this is a generational opportunity for us to ensure that we get it right, and that decades from now, when we look back, we see that folks in rural communities, women, people of color, have got access to jobs, both direct at Micron and both indirect through all the construction workforce that's happening. And I think that in our, to everyone's point, that opportunity allows for us to move forward and work together. And from a private sector perspective, we're looking forward to, matching our dollars and growing our dollars in partnerships with folks in this room.
Be bold. Let's just keep breaking the glass. We don't have to do policies the way we've always done them. From the local level to the state level to the national level, if you're going to give, if you're going to work with an industry or you're coming in with a partner's coming in, sure, we're fine if you want to help them develop. There's money involved, there's tax breaks and all the rest of it, but at the same time, people are all right with that if they see that there are other responsibilities tied to that money that really, truly will make their community better. That has not always been the case. It's always that little stuff. What we're seeing now is we're going much deeper than ever before. So let's not go backwards, because there's some in industry, let's be clear, who don't like this. They want the money, they don't want the strings. And let's just keep being bold and breaking that glass and see what else we can do so that's everyone together building a better community and therefore a better country.
Please join me in thanking our panel.
What terrific partnerships on display. Thank you all so much. And I love someone who's going to do their homework on Al Schenker, so that was extra special for me. I think you heard it up here, referenced already. Labor leaders have long understood the value of partnerships, that the solidarity can exist when partnerships are created around that common good. This is a moment to support and strengthen experiential learning, and our next panelists are the leaders championing this work in the labor movement. I am pleased to welcome Stanley Littell back to the stage to moderate this conversation on widening the aperture of education and work. And I am very pleased to welcome our panelists. Liz Shuler, the president of the AFL-CIO. And welcome Randi Weingarten, president of AFT and the Albert Schenker Institute, back to our stage as well. Back to you, Stan.
Thank you so much. Are you guys fed up with me already? It was interesting that the reference was not only to the Albert Schenker Institute, but Albert Schenker. And it was back in 1996 that I had the opportunity to pull together a national education summit that was attended by 48 of the 50 governors, major CEOs from every state, and education leaders. And Al Schenker attended that summit. And he was on stage. And the audience of governors and major business leaders had an opportunity to hear him on a panel. And afterwards, people came up and said, boy, he was great. I thought we were not supposed to like people from the teachers' union. That was amazing. And it really was amazing. And now we have an opportunity to hear from two of our major labor leaders to talk about moving this agenda forward and the kinds of things that will be real success going forward. So Liz, would you like to go first?
Sure, and I just want to say thank you, of course, to the Albert Schenker Institute for this conference, AFT and Randi Weingarten. It's a joy anytime I get to be on stage with this woman and talk about these issues, because we are both so passionate about it. I get really juiced up, so it is an awesome opportunity. And of course, CAP.
We talk about it privately.
Yes.
We don't just talk about it on stage.
Oh, yeah. We talk about it privately, yes. So every time we see each other, we're talking about this issue. And Randi mentioned to me, this is the first time really that there's been a real focus on experiential learning. And AFT has become such a driver. With the advent and rise of CTE coming back, and I think Michael was talking about that pendulum that has swung back and forth, right? That for a long time we didn't have these programs, and they went away, and then now we're back, and I've seen it through the lens of coming up through my union, the IBEW, the electrical workers, and I think about me as a young person growing up in a household with a father who went through an electrical apprenticeship, and the opportunity that gave our family to have a middle-class life, to have a pathway to a good career, not just a job, a career that was going to last for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And he didn't go to college. He came back from Vietnam, actually, and started with the GI Bill and took some classes, but figured it wasn't for him. But he was able to provide a living so that my sister and I could go to college. And so that is what grounds us in the labor movement, thinking about that long history of how we in the labor have been the center of gravity for workers who are looking for that next opportunity. Whether you're coming back from Vietnam, whether you were a horse and buggy driver, back in the early days before the combustion engine, whether it was when personal computing came on and you were an office employee looking for that next pathway to the training that you needed for a new and better job. And fast forward to today with AI and machine learning. The labor movement has been the center of gravity for all of those transitions since our inception, through every industrial revolution. And so we would say, we were the original experiential learners, right, through every industrial revolution. So I guess I wanted to start there because there's a lot of fear in today's economy. We know the destabilizing forces that are upon us, whether it is attacks on our democracy, climate change, certainly technology and AI. Working people fear, 70% fear that they will lose their jobs as a result of technology. So this conversation is so extremely important right now because Randi will tell you 60% of people don't go to college. So we have to have multiple pathways to good careers. And I say multiple pathways because I will put a pin in this. A lot of people say alternative pathways because, oh, if you don't go to college, you need an alternative, right? That reinforces the stereotype that somehow you're less than. We are in a different moment in this country right now. We have a chance to get it right, and the panel before us was the opportunity where we have business and labor and government and education institutions all coming together to create a new future.
Thank you. Randi.
So, look, I mean, we tease a lot about this, but Liz and I have become very close friends, as well as working together pretty much on a daily basis. Liz is the first female president of the AFL-CIO.
Here, here.
She just, I mean, she comes from an IBEW family. Thinking about work that way from people from the outside who would tend to think of this as traditional blue-collar work. These are great jobs. The skill that an electrician has to have is huge. So the most important thing I want to say, and I'll probably say this with the governor here too, we have to debunk. I'm talking to educators now, and I'm talking to, frankly, the wealthy elite in the country. We have to debunk this view that an alternative, that all sorts of different pathways, a technical pathway, an apprentice program, going into a number of pathways in terms of healthcare, advanced manufacturing. These are noble, fantastic jobs and careers. Some of them require college, some of them don't. Some of them ultimately gives a kid lots of different choices to go to college later and to get it paid for, maybe by Siemens as opposed to themselves. So the most part of us working on these things together is to show a different pathway in to work and employment and career. And it doesn't have to always be high school, college, white collar. And we really are trying to debunk this and to debunk the stereotype of vocational ed or career tech ed. I was astounded when, and I work in this area all the time. I was astounded when Khanna in one of the last panels said, we spend $400 on academic education to $1 on career tech education. How are we going to change it if we don't do something different? So basically, we are trying through different pathways to say, let's work as a labor movement to work on career pathways and workforce development, not just wait till we are organizing the shop afterwards. And I also want to just say about Microsoft, they, as part of this partnership, have a neutrality agreement in terms of organizing. That is a huge goal for all of us. And then also in the education space, say, let's not always say college, 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 college. Let's actually say as educators, our jobs are to prepare our kids for life, for career, for college, for civic opportunities and engagement. And so we're trying to actually think about this from lots of different perspectives. But I think the workforce, and this is the last thing I'll say, it used to be so separate. And by us working together, we're trying to actually align things together so that the worker or the student sees the opportunities in front of him, her, or them, as opposed to the companies or the colleges being the only ones that have those choices.
And it could be a lot of different opportunities depending upon the individual student. What we've seen is the growth of micro-credentials, where an employer recognizes a particular credential that somebody could get in a relatively short period of time and at a low cost, but that micro-credential can be credit-bearing so that if it turns out that that individual might want to go on and get a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, they still have the opportunity to do that and the investment that they've made, because making a judgment about what a young person could do at age 14 or 15, you might have somebody like Azaria McLemore, who was here earlier, and she was on a trajectory to get just a 2-year degree, and now she's a lawyer and the assistant district attorney for Orange County. So a young person could do almost anything if they get the right investment. So what do you see going forward? Are there different things, Liz, that you think we could do differently?
Absolutely, and I love that you raised this issue of micro-credentials, because I think for a long time we've been locked in a system that allowed essentially the employer on an individualized basis to kind of dictate the terms and the skills that people need, and it was sort of boutique to that particular employer. And what we're talking about now is a foundation of skills that the workers themselves can have agency over, that can actually be portable and that they own. Because work is going to be extremely fluid in the future. Often, too, we trained for one type of career and field and worked there for 30 years, and then we retired, right? That is going to change quite a bit, as we know, with technology. And so to allow workers to jump from industry to industry, for example, to work for different employers in a particular industry, we're going to need a system that is flexible. And I think this notion of all of us coming together, establishing those standards so that workers themselves have power. And the union is the center of gravity for that. We have a history and a tradition of working within an ecosystem where, for example, if you went to work in aerospace, you could live in a place like Seattle and go to a high school that's integrated with a community college, perhaps, that is working with the union, the machinists union, and the company all together to make sure that workers have the best possible future ahead of them. We see that in the construction industry, and I don't want to use construction always as the model. It's the best and most sophisticated model of apprenticeship, but apprenticeship actually applies to all kinds of industries. But, I was at the Tradeswomen Build Nations conference recently, and Linda Hamilton, this woman I met, who became an operating engineer, was a single mom, was working dead-end jobs, met someone who was in the union, and didn't ever think that that was a career that could be for her. She was a woman. She's like, isn't that heavy industry work that really isn't for me? And they said, no, absolutely, you could write your ticket. And fast forward to today, she's actually graduated through her apprenticeship into working on schools and bridges and, these high-rise buildings, and now is a dispatcher within the union. So you can see that career path ahead of you in a field that maybe you didn't think was for you. So I think this notion of building those stackable credentials, whether it's CTE program to apprenticeship program to some kind of credentialing program within a tech company, the idea is that we're all working together to form that baseline that's recognized and can translate across industries.
Randi?
So this is, where, in some ways, where the intersection of education and labor becomes so important. Because in the public space, whether it's a community college or whether it is a high school, we should be aligned a whole lot more with the jobs that are available today and tomorrow. So, but we need to have, as Michael said earlier, and I said earlier, we need to have the ability to train kids in high schools. And frankly, Stan, you and I did an op-ed a while ago that said there's three, critical components to this work going forward. And the labor movement has done this in the building trades, but we have not, as a community writ large, done this in other things. And so if you think about what the apprenticeship programs of the trades are, and you back map it, it is exactly what you and I said, which is you start with some academic credentialing starting in high school. You don't have to start in college. You can start in high school. And second, there has to be real agency with companies because there needs to be internships. There needs to be jobs. And third, there needs to be opportunities post those internships. And when I say internships, we need paid internships. So if you think about the trades and what they've done over the course of the last 20, 30 years, they have taken over the professional development, just like medical schools do and residency programs. They've taken over the professional development to go from journeyman to actually being a skilled tradesperson. And what we're suggesting, what I'm suggesting, is let the public schools, whether it be K through higher ed, do those same things for so many of the other occupations and vocations in the country. That will mean that all those business people that we just saw before will all of a sudden be much more invested in public schooling, as the Secretary of Education just said. So we're really trying to create, as Liz just said, a real ecosystem here. And when you start in high school, and you start with jobs that are available, and where we're doing this from the labor perspective as well as the education perspective, you then are in every place in the country. That's what we're trying to create this vision of. And the last thing I'll say is that's what, when you look at how the Biden administration is literally trying to rewrite the rules so that we have manufacturing back here, that we don't outsource every new disruptive technology to someone else in the world. Let us also not only organize it, but also be the quality assurance in it. That's our vision.
That's great. And you talked about the paid internship opportunity connected to experiential learning. Before I left the IBM company, they made a commitment to hire 1,000 high school interns a year through the P-TECH program across the United States, and then spread it into the 27 other countries that have P-TECH programs. But a lot of employers will have difficulty hiring large numbers of young people. It was back in 1965 that President Johnson started the Federal College Work-Study Program. And a student in college could get a Federal College Work-Study grant where the federal money would pay 70 cents on the dollar for that internship, and the employer, the university, would pay the remaining 30%. Is this time for us to think about something like that, where instead of only to earn money for college, high school students could get the opportunity to have a shared cost internship, and the internship could be in private employers, it could be in public employers, it could be in not-for-profit employers, and give more young people experiential learning in a really meaningful kind of way. Those the kinds of ideas that we should be putting on the table now, Liz?
Yes, those are the ideas we should be putting on the table, and
not a leading question.
Softball. You know, when I think back to about this country's history around investment and how we're kind of coming full circle again, where it used to be that the government really did, you know, spend funds to invest in these kinds of programs. And then they sort of waned, and employers kind of picked it up, and then employers, of course, saw it as a competitive advantage or disadvantage, whether they invested in training. And then with competitive pressures over the years, with financialization of our economy, they offloaded the costs of training. And I think, you know, between the government and the employers, you know, losing their edge, frankly, in these kinds of investments, it's fallen on the individual. The individual now bears the burden for their training. And you see tons of young people now in debt because they're either going to college and assuming that debt, or often in dead-end training programs where they front the money and have no good job at the end of that training. They're left stranded. So I absolutely believe that we are in this moment where we're coming back around what's old is new, that our government programs need to align with the ambitions that have been laid out. I'll use manufacturing as a quick example because we're seeing now the largest investments with the IIJA, the CHIPS and Science, and clean energy investments. Whole new industries are emerging in this country. And there's a whole lot of hand-wringing around the, quote, labor shortage, right? And that where are we going to find the skilled workers? It's because we have not invested for decades. And so now we're at this moment where we can use things like the Department of Commerce, I think semiconductors was mentioned earlier, role in the training dollars that they've received through these grants with the companies like Micron, like Microsoft that were on this stage, Siemens and others, and their labor partners to make sure that, again, the individuals, the workers, the talent pipeline that you're going to need to make these industries happen is planned for, is invested in. And that means that our country is more competitive, that we are positioning the US of A to take advantage of this moment that we have in front of us. And I think that young people are hungry for it. You have communities of color who have been left behind with these opportunities in the past, who are hungry for it. Women who have never seen themselves in these industries, hungry for it. So I think it's up to us. It's an equity issue. It's a future forward-looking planning issue. It is also a moment for the labor movement to recalibrate how we approach representation and collective bargaining around these issues. And so again, I think it is a unique moment in time for us to be working in a tripartite way like other countries do to plan for this kind of future.
Great. Randi.
So think about it as education, engagement, employment. You know, so normally I talk about the C's, but I love what Raphael did earlier today with the T's. And if you're, what you said earlier, Stan, about Al, think about what the two of us are talking about. We both are really engaged in collective bargaining. We believe in collective bargaining. We believe in raising wages. We believe in fighting for all sorts of things that are very much connected to a family doing better in life. But here, what both of us are talking about and what we spend our time doing to not only widen the aperture of work, but create a new system, a redesigned system where workers and families are at the center, and where we create something in America, in some ways like Germany and Austria do, but in a much broader way, where schools have, schools that are paid for by taxes actually do a lot of this work, and where there is an alignment with the labor movement so that when people get to various different places where they work, they can actually have the bounty of their productivity because of the collective work we're all doing. That's the new economy. And I'll say one more thing, which is that is what creates a just transition, as opposed to every other transition we've had with every other destabilizing influence in the economy, from agrarian to AI. What we're saying is get that worker's voice in there and get the wisdom that we bring to actually make sure the worker has the kind of agency and engagement the worker and his, her, or their family needs.
That's a great point, because when we think about education reforms in the United States, going back decades, one of the biggest mistakes that people make is not having everyone at the table when the key decisions are being made. So when we talk about something like the workforce skill crisis and the challenge that we have to incorporate experiential learning. It's not just one segment of the economy or one key stakeholder that can set the rules. Everybody's got to be involved, because if they're not involved, ultimately they will not be a collaborator and the reform will not take hold. And people learn that lesson. And going forward, do you believe we have the vehicles in place to provide that kind of collaborative decision-making and planning so that we won't make the same mistake going forward? Liz?
I think we are woefully underprepared and ill-equipped to have that model right now in the United States. And as Randi said, it's very much alive in other countries. And we have been locked in this sort of adversarial mindset for so long. It's just starting to open up. And the panel you saw before us, I think, is a real opportunity for employers to actually get out there and talk more among their peers to say, you know, those old stereotypes of unions? Things are a-changing, and we're actually a stabilizing force, the labor movement is, to work with business, to be solutions-driven, and solve problems together. And we got a lot on our shoulders when we think about what we have to prepare for. And how else, as you said, are we going to do this unless we do it together? So I think there's a lot we can learn from these models overseas that are so successful. Companies are just starting to wake up to the prospects of what we can do together. And I think there's a big problem of both selling it and scaling it at this moment. Getting folks to really believe that experiential learning and multiple pathways to good careers are a viable solution for their kids and for our country. And then also, how do we scale it up fast enough so that we can meet the demand that is coming at us? Because we have so much opportunity in front of us, and we all want to take advantage of that and make sure we get it right this time. As I said, especially with, you know, communities who have been left behind.
Randi, you get the final word.
Look, experiential learning is a transformative strategy that can help in so many ways. It helps engage students. It helps get students back to school. It helps create, it's a kind of strategy that helps prepare students for work of today and tomorrow. It's an idea that should have happened years and years ago. But the fact that Liz and I, as allies, are fighting to make it the norm, not the exception. The fact that we, as a labor movement, and have to actually fight to change policy to do this. The fact that this is a union conference that is creating this means that we have a long way to go to get others to believe that this should be the norm, not the exception. So we'll keep fighting for it, but we shouldn't have to fight so hard for a transformative strategy that will change America for the better.
Al Shanker would be smiling. Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
What a fantastic panel. Thank you so much. Stan, thank you for your work drawing these discussions out of our last few panels. Now we have an incredible discussion in front of you on experiential learning and boosting the state economy. We have had the opportunity to hear from some of our federal leaders, to hear from practitioners in the field from across the United States, to hear from business partners from across the country. So to begin this next panel, I would like to welcome our moderator for this conversation, Steve Clemens, the founding editor-at-large of Semaphore. And please welcome Governor Wes Moore, the 63rd Governor of Maryland, in conversation with Steve. Thank you. Joining him will be Randi Weingarten, President of AFT and the Albert Shanker Institute.
We're going to let Randi ask some questions too.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
Randy, why don't you sit in the middle? Yeah, we're gonna eat you alive here. Here, Randy. There you go. And then let me get you this.
Okay.
Great. We have very high tech. Governor Moore, thank you. And I want to thank Randi for helping us to put on the dock this question of how to unlock and unstrand talent.
Yes.
And get it connected. You know, I'm somebody who's been obsessed for a long time about how to get our national economic agenda right and not leave people behind in it and kind of move it. And Governor, you and I had a very good time. I had a good time. I don't know if you did.
I did.
When I interviewed you with Semaphore. And at the time, you talked about your disappointment in how slow and you know, sort of relatively unperforming the Maryland economy had been.
Yes.
And I'd just like to hear from you and have you share with our team how this topic, you didn't talk about experiential education because of this forum, but you went out there and you just did it on your own. So how does that connect to how you think about Maryland's aspirations, the economy, and what you want yourself to be measured by when we take a look at what you've done, you know, a couple of years from now?
Thanks, Steve. Thank you, and thank you, Randi. I mean, this is a joy for me, and I truly appreciate it. And
well, just at the beginning, it is.
No, it will be throughout. But also, I mean, this is something I love talking about because it was so necessary for our state to take seriously and get moving on. If you do not have a participatory economy, you do not have a growing economy. And there were so many random and arbitrary and frankly miserly policies and barriers that continue to stand in place in order for people to be able to participate in our economy. And so when I was first inaugurated, Maryland was ranked 47th in economic momentum. Our economy had grown by 0.2% over the past 5 years, right? So it's not that our economy was stagnant.
How did that compare to the neighborhood?
So if you look at the other states, the average state over the same period of time grew by 7.5%.
So you're talking Delaware,
yes,
Pennsylvania,
going up to Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, 7.5%. Maryland had grown by 0.2%. Right? So it's not even just that we were stalled. I mean, they're stagnant. We were just completely stalled. And part of the challenge was, if you look at what happens on the other end, Maryland, when I was first inaugurated, was ranked 43rd in unemployment. So you did not have pathways for people to be able to participate. You had a skill set gap that people weren't able to fulfill. And so we just made it our core focus, saying, we have got to get this economy going. We've got to make sure that we have more people participating in the economy. We've got to make sure that we have better pathways for people to be able to go into these growth industries that Maryland had. And you know, there's top industries that Maryland should be a leader in. But if you're not creating the right kind of educational pathways in order for people to participate, then what exactly are you doing? And you have this massive disconnect. And so it is true. We were very intentional about being able to remove the barriers that continue to allow people, to keep them from participating. Things like where we have some of the best four-year colleges in America in the state of Maryland, something that I'm very proud of. But we are very intentional. In fact, I said it during my inaugural address. We are going to end this myth that every single one of our students must attend one of them in order to be economically successful. It's just not true. That we are going to create additional pathways and get more young people involved with skill set building and development. And that's why Maryland is now the first state in this country that offers a service year option to every single one of our high school graduates.
So I want to get Randi in this in a second, but I want you to tell us what that is, because when I read it, it was kind of breathtaking. Every single student gets that opportunity to make that choice and go into it. So, I mean, really explain it in its grit, because when I didn't know it when we had met before, but how is that being received, and how is it beginning to change the contours? Because I have to say that when I was listening to forums up here, commentary up here, what was the guy's, I should know all of our speakers' names, but Michael Mulgrew from, UFT, and Randi were up here earlier saying that the accountability system within the high school system doesn't allow teachers to actually robustly provide pathways in the experiential side, they're kind of screwed if they succeed in this. And so I'm just interested in how you've changed the alignment of stars.
Yeah, and part of it is, and I think that's exactly right, part of it is we're literally grading our high schools based on your 4-year college acceptance rate.
Exactly right.
I'm sorry, why is that a prerequisite to show what a good school is or what a good high school is? If that's not the pathway for all of our students to be able to attend, and I think about it in my case, I did not attend a 4-year college when I first got out. When I first, I was 17 years old when I joined the Army. Right? I say, I wasn't even old enough to join by myself. My mother had to sign the paperwork for me because I was still a minor. But after my teenage years, she would sign whatever paperwork that the Army put in front of her. But I was a non-traditional student. I went to a 2-year college, right? So it's like, I just don't, Einstein had this thing where he talked about this idea of if you tell a fish that the definition of genius is to climb a tree, then that fish will always feel like it's insufficient, right? And that's what we're doing. And so the reason that we wanted to focus on this service year, and so for Maryland high school graduates or people with GEDs or graduate equivalencies, they now have a chance to have a year of service to the state of Maryland, and they can choose however they want to do it. We have some of our people working in the environment, some people working in helping returning citizens, some people who are helping young people, some people who are helping veterans, and it is totally their choice. And we really did it for a few different reasons. One is we're big believers in experiential learning. If you can give young people a chance to find their thing that makes their heart beat a little bit faster, you're going to be able to find a young person who then becomes fired up for what the next stage of their life is going to be. The second reason is because I believe, that this really became one of the best workforce development tools that we had, particularly for those young people between those ages of 18 and 23, where it is a bit more complicated for them oftentimes to figure out what does the next step of life look like. And I don't think it should be, lost on anybody. It's not lost on us that, when I was first inaugurated, that Maryland was ranked 43rd in unemployment. Now, for the 5th month in a row, Maryland has amongst the lowest unemployment rates in the entire country.
Wow.
And I think the other big thing is that, why this was so important for us is in this time of this political divisiveness and this political vitriol, in this time where people are so separated by political ideologies, I'm just a big believer that service will save us. That if we can be a state that gets to know each other again, if we can be a state that works on big projects together again, that is going to be how our state is going to move past this moment where frustration and political divisiveness just seems to be the cause of the day.
Randi?
So I'm looking at Stan for a second as you're talking, Governor, to make the point that it really does require governors to do this stuff. Stan and I served on a commission, a Cuomo commission, I don't know, 10 years ago or so, and maybe longer, where I raised the issue of having service learning for all kids. First off...
And was Stan the opponent?
No, he was the chair who agreed with me, but
just want to get that right.
So many other people in the commission were like, well, that's not what schools should be doing. And we didn't. Wait. Let me.
But it raised the question: but who are the villains in this story?
No,
Why is the story taken? Yeah.
Let me finish this for a second because I want to say something good about what, if I may. Sorry,
yes,
if I may. Which is that it was not in the imagination. So it's not villains. It's not in the imagination because the imagination at that point was, oh no. We just have to get kids through high school, get them good enough grades, they go to college. And so this notion of a service year, which frankly, rich kids get in terms of when they take a gap year.
Exactly right.
And but then, so when I saw that the governor had gotten this done, I was like, wow. For all the reasons he just said, it's the passion meets purpose, a sense of accomplishment, a sense of critical thinking and all the different things, relationship building, and being able to talk to people who you may not agree with and who may not agree with you, and instead of punching them out, you're talking to people. All of the basically life skills that we in schooling should be helping in a really equal way so that anyone, regardless of where they start, could actually have this opportunity. That's experiential learning at its best. That's also what Career Tech Ed does. That's what Raphael does in his classrooms. So, but the reason you need governors is because education is so fragmented throughout this country that a governor is going to have more weight in terms of changing an educational system than virtually anyone else in the system. So thank you.
So, Governor, let me ask you, when it comes to experiential education and the kind of campaign that you've been on, how has it been received? And when I ask about, villains in this, part of it's sort of soft villains. I have some friends in the media here, and we're always looking for somebody to blame for something, constructively blame. But I think, in the process of this, as you sort of look at resources in the state, what you've committed to on taxes and all this, is this an affordable thing, and are people saying, hey, this is the wrong way to put resources?
No, in fact, I think we've been able to show in our state that we can do big things. Right. If you look at, we made the single largest investment in childcare in our state's history. We have now a service year option for all of our high school graduates. We made the single largest investment in public education in the history, and we did it all, and we did not have to raise taxes, right? So I think we're showing that you can actually have a measurement of fiscal discipline and also still go get very big things done. It's about how you think about and prioritizing this work. And so, and I agree with Randy. I don't think it was a villain per se, but I think it's asking us to change our definition of success.
Exactly right.
Where I just think that over these past 20 years, 30 years, there was this idea that somehow you must go on to get a 4-year degree in order to be economically successful. And people showed the stats, and we all saw the statistics that show, if a person has a 4-year degree, they'll end up, achieving over $1 million more over the lifetime of their career. And so that became the standard. That became the thing that everyone tried to move towards. All we were simply saying was this, that, the people who are pushing that, congratulations, you won the last 2-3 decades in terms of the conversation, the narrative. But it's not the only option. And so by simply saying that, yes, we are going to make sure we're supporting our 4-year schools and those students who attend it, we are going to support our community colleges and those who attend our community colleges. And at the same time, if there's a young person who makes the decision and says, that's not going to be my path. And I remember a young man who I met over at Western Tech, which is a high school in Baltimore County, and an apprenticeship high school in Baltimore County. He said, I knew when I was in 9th grade, I did not want to go to college. I knew it. And so now he's working in advanced manufacturing. This was his magnet throughout high school. He's now about to finish high school. He already has job offers that literally is going to pay him 6 figures in his first year. Guess what? He won. Congratulations. Right? And so, but if we looked at it through the old prism, someone would say, well, what's wrong with him? Nothing.
Well, look, we didn't tell Governor Moore this is kind of like the Tonight Show, my style. There are many young people here who don't remember Johnny Carson, but Johnny Carson had Ed McMahon, and Randy is my Ed McMahon in this, and I'm Johnny. And we've got a special guest who came in, of course, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who just got a 1,019-page bill on his desk that he's going to read by tomorrow. And they've got votes today on funding the U.S. government or 6 agencies. But, I wanted to build Senator Whitehouse. You all know the senator from Rhode Island who is up this term, but he has done more than any other United States senator. And I think this is a fair statement to sort of raise the issue about public ethics and to begin looking at the problem of corruption in government and raise the visibility around our institutional social contract. And when Randy and I and others were talking about the experiential education, the economy and others, and I was just so taken with my conversation with Governor Wes Moore a while back about the social contract and how it, in my view, that social contract works for a portion of the population, but not enough of the population. So I just wanted to invite Senator Whitehouse in for 14 minutes. He has a hard out in about 14 minutes. And I want to give, so Sheldon, I'd like to hear the public ethics dimensions of our institutional commitment on education and tell us where we should go.
Well, first of all, great to be here with the governor.
Do you guys like
a mere
each other?
senator and an actual governor. It's so
No, I
thrilling
mean,
for
do you really like each other? Did you campaign? Did you have a robocall against Westmore?
Here's who I
Yeah,
really like.
okay,
I really like
Okay.
Randy, and our RIAFT has
Right.
been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful group to work with for a long time. So I'm feeling quite blessed to be here. I would say that we are going through kind of a moment in our country about ethics and corruption. Ethics and corruption in the old days was just one person doing one bad thing and maybe they got caught and maybe they went to jail. Now it's a whole institutionalized thing in which being corrupt is a sort of political way of life. Lying about what is going on is the main job of very enormous TV and other news outlets. And it puts real pressure on kids to figure out that they're working in a different environment. I remember in my generation, the Cuyahoga River caught fire. And everybody realized, oh, crap. This pollution stuff is different than we thought. And we had a societal mind change about pollution. And when I started going to health food stores, there were people that had like their shoes backwards and everything was in a bin and you had to bring your own scooper. Now it's, Whole Foods and it's a mega industry and we've changed the way we think about our food. We've changed the way we think about pollution. We need to start training up kids to have a better sense of what is polluting their information diet, what is the junk food in their information diet, and they have to operate in a world in which grown-ups are persistently lying to them, which was not something that we saw so
You
much
just
of
said something
before.
very important. Can I have the students that are here as as examples, metaphors, living metaphors of experiential education and journalism stand up for a minute? Can you guys stand up? So as part of the message of thinking about how people get into a profession and live that profession, an apprenticeship, or what you call experiential education, I want to tell you that what Senator Whitehouse just said about reporting more broadly this, but he's also a powerful guy. So is Governor Moore. These are the people you have to hold accountable. Do you like that, or do you welcome the fact that they're going to go after you both?
Totally.
And so
that's what we're here for. That's my job. and yes, and I think that again, when people get active, it's really important to understand what's motivating them and is it truthful? Because a lot of the stuff that the governor and I get presented with is fake. It's ginned up, it's phony, and people need to, as part of their education, they need to be trained and prepared to deal with systematic lying by very powerful forces.
Get Governor real quick, and then Randy.
No, I totally agree because, I think about when people ask me when I was first getting into this, I'd never run for office before running for governor for my state, and people said, well, what made you want to get into politics?
You're going to keep doing it, or?
Oh yeah, it feels pretty good now.
We hope so.
but and it's thank you. But and people said, "Well, what made you want to get into politics?" And I was like, "I didn't. I wanted to be the governor because you just felt governor is it is, and Randy's right. It's a unique role, but also it is this idea where when people talk about politics and policy and a frustration that I think a lot of people have, it's real. I say I had to get many members of my family to vote for me. And it's not because my family and I aren't cool. I mean, we're very cool. It's that for many members of my family, they hadn't voted. They just have felt disillusioned. And so there is a cynicism that I think everything the senator was talking about, like there is a cynicism about this system that we have to recognize as real and a frustration.
So from the educator point of view, not from the AFT president point of view, two things about what they both just said. Number one, which is part of the reason why we are so into experiential learning. Critical thinking, critical thinking, critical thinking. You know, we could immediately say, oh, we should have media literacy all over, but if we don't have critical thinking and a kid sees X on TikTok, for example, if that kid doesn't have the tools to say, well, is that true? Or what else am I seeing? And if we have not used the muscle to teach kids critical thinking, then it's just indoctrination. But the second piece that the governor said as well, which is part of the indoctrination, look, I'm an AP Gov teacher, is autocrats use apathy as a tool. They use apathy as a tool. It's not just disinformation as a tool, it's apathy. And part of what you're doing, Gov, in this work, you are making government credible and relevant for people. And so if they actually trust that what you're doing to help people succeed works, and they trust, Senator, what you're doing is helping people succeed, then that also pushes back on the autocrat and on the apathy. And so all of this gets interconnected because the people who are corrupt, they're going to have power regardless. They're just doing power in all sorts of different ways, which I would say 20 years ago we would have said, what? They have the audaciousness to do that? Yes, they do. But if we don't push back by making sure that kids have a sense of critical thinking and relationship building, and they have a different way, which is what you're doing, and create the trust in government, then we are sunk.
So let me ask you both a question. Senator, you first. You know, in 2016, I interviewed then Vice President Biden for The Atlantic, and he just, you know, I didn't expect it. I didn't ask him anything prompted. He just said out of the blue, he says, Steve, the problem with the Democratic Party is it had become a party of snobs. And so part of what I'm interested in this today is deconstructing snobbishness out there, or, you know, basically looking at folks who take one track versus another track, this kind of zero-sum game between communities. How do we begin, I mean, you were getting at it, Governor, how do we begin sewing people back together so there is this sense of civitas, mutual commitment? You can have it out and argue all you want about different perspectives, but I think it gets into ethics and civic engagement and a belief that, you know, the minority view has rights. All of that dimension is what I think Vice President Biden was talking about. And one, I'd like to hear, Sheldon, do you agree with Joe Biden? And two, do you think there's a way through schools and education to diffuse that?
I don't. I look around the Democratic caucus in the Senate, and I don't see a snob anywhere. And if I look at the people who I know in my life who I think are snobs, they're as likely to be Republicans as they are Democrats. I just don't think that's a thing. I do think...
You just made news there, so that's good. No,
I do think that Democrats have not been as effective as we should have about telling the stories that matter to people and putting the villain in the story. So one of my crusades is on climate change, right. And it's not enough if you're going to engage people in the story to pat ourselves on the back and say what a wonderful thing the IRA was, like climate change is an excuse for a jobs program. It's great to have a lot of climate jobs, but at the end of the day, there is a massive industry out there that is making billions of dollars, spending billions of dollars in politics, and systematically lying to people about the danger that they face and their role in trying to make it better.
Right.
And you got to be able to tell people that truth, because otherwise, if that's snobbery, then I guess we are snobs, but I think it's different. I think this is just, we haven't been as energetic as we should be about laying out the whole story for people to understand.
And where do schools fit into that?
Schools fit into teaching kids to make sure that they are demanding the whole story, that they're understanding that there's a lot of secret money floating around, there's probably a nasty motive floating around, to be critical evaluators of the public information that they get. In the same way that people now look at pollution as a thing, but didn't used to. Smells like jobs was what smoke was. Or pay way more attention to their diets, and it's not just TV dinners any longer. We got to have that same adaptation, that same alertness to the pollution and the junk food that is now in our information diet, and understand that people are doing it on purpose.
I'm just going to pause right there, and I'm going to excuse Senator Whitehouse. We had a deal to get him on the road. You've got to leave by 12.
There is a vote waiting for me, and a lot of angry senators wondering why the hell I'm not there to close out
So
the
anyway,
vote.
I want to thank Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. This is Washington, folks. It's how it works. This is DC. You got to. If you all saw me and using my iPhone up here, it wasn't that I was being rude. It was that I was managing multiple motorcades at the same time. So I interrupted you, but I want to come back to the same question.
So I would say, I can't speak to what the president was saying about the individuals being snobs. I can tell you though that many of these policies have been snobbish, because that's exactly how we've incentivized it. I mean, we have policies that will tell schools or students that your funding or your ranking is based on things like four-year college acceptance rates. That's snobbish. That we have policies that allowed people to work jobs, and in some cases multiple jobs, and still live at or below a poverty line. That is snobbish. That there are policies that are in place when you have people who are working to get a second chance in life. People who are returning citizens, people who are coming from military service, and we're basically acting like the service that they did all of those years when it comes to transferable skill sets, that it doesn't matter because it doesn't translate into the way that we think about applicability and the way we think about usefulness. That is snobbish. So I can't speak to the individuals, but I can tell you right now, we find ourselves constantly having to upend snobbish policies.
Ed?
So,
that was a joke.
thank you. Thank you, Jimmy. Or Johnny.
Johnny.
Thank you, Johnny.
I just feel so bad for young people. They don't get it. And I'm going to, bring in old pictures of Ed McMahon and Johnny Carson, two of my heroes. Yeah.
As opposed to Stephen.
Ready to go. Yes, ma'am.
So I would argue, extending what the governor just said, trickle-down economics is snobbish. Because one of the things we don't teach in K-12 is, if people take a basic economics course, it's like their second semester senior year. So, but trickle-down economics basically says that the wealthy will stay wealthy, and hopefully they will trickle things down to everyone else. And what I think we're both trying to do is upend that and rewrite the rules to say that the mass of humanity should have options and opportunities. And you do that through education, and you do that through rewriting all of the economic rules so that there is an ability from high school on for kids to have all sorts of different options, but that's where experiential learning comes in, and that's where service learning comes in.
Well, let me ask you, Governor, about experiential education as a tool to attract investment into the state. And so we had Micron Technologies, a major semiconductor company, Microsoft, and Siemens on stage a little while ago at a union event, which is that in itself must be kind of historic. And I'm just sort of interested in the question of how it becomes a tool. And I'll just do one little vignette here. When I worked for Senator Jeff Bingaman in the 1990s, a Democratic senator from New Mexico, Intel at that time had come in and put one of its major fab plants in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. But the state had given away so much of its tax base to attract Intel in that Rio Rancho couldn't afford an elementary school. Intel bought and paid for the elementary school, and you might applaud that, but it also raises really important questions about governance, about social contract, about company towns, and it was something that became very controversial. So I'm really interested in what the right equilibrium is in education, in tax benefits, and attracting this new array of investment that's coming back into the United States or being created in the United States.
I mean, I think that level of partnership is going to be important. I think about it where even when we did the service year option, we had nonprofits and organizations, but do you know who some of the first people who signed up to say we'll take on the students were people in the private sector? Because it turned out that they were actually using it as essentially workforce development. Because they're like, wait a second, if you tell us we can get a young person who is going to get a whole suite of life skills, things like financial literacy, financial education, part of a cohort, working with other people, and they can then come on board and also receiving a stipend at the end of it, you had businesses who were like, sign me up. In fact, I'll take 3. Right? Because they saw it as part of a larger workforce development platform. And it helped to address an issue that our state was having where for every single person filing for unemployment in the state of Maryland, we had 2 available jobs. Right? And people say, well, how does that make sense? It makes sense because there's a disconnect between the skill sets that people were getting and the skill sets that were necessary for the industries that we were growing in. You know, Maryland right now, we are the home of U.S. Cyber Command. We're the home of the NSA. We're the home of Fort Meade. We're the new home of the FBI. Right? Maryland is the cyber capital.
You won that battle?
Oh, yes, and I'll say it again loud. We are the new home of the FBI. And so, which by the way is me worth over 7,500 jobs, over $4 billion of economic activity, but who's counting? But the reason I say that is this. Maryland is the home of cyber, right? Cyber is being built and developed and grows in the state of Maryland. So we have to make sure that we have an education system that's also creating that pipeline for those industries and that pipeline. So I think having that partnership with the private sector is something that we do think is important. Having the partnership where they want to be involved and they want to hire our young people coming out. We want that to be able to happen. And we think that's part of the reason that Progress Produces Partnership is part of the reason that we've gotten our economic engine going, because we're just being very deliberate about what are those industries, what are those areas, and then what role can our education system play in terms of helping to fulfill those slots.
Randi?
So, look, all morning long, we've been talking about all sorts of different problems, whether it's post-COVID, whether it's student attendance, whether it's joy or passion and what students bring with them, whether it's poverty, whether it's the pipeline not matching the work opportunities. We've been talking about all of these problems. And we come back to this one solution in at least in K-12, and I would argue further on, and you saw that with Liz's panel as well. We can have an education strategy, whether it's service learning, whether it's career tech ed, whether it's civic engagement, whether it's dual coursework. We have an education strategy that can actually solve a lot of these problems. You saw the teachers from the beginning, the first panel, saying we want to do it. And so the key is, how do we change policy to make this happen? You heard Khanna say, we spend $400 on academic education to every dollar in voc ed. That means it requires a change of policy. You heard me say earlier, and Michael.
It's 400 to 1?
He said 400 to 1. You heard Michael and me say earlier, if we have a national accountability process or paradigm that is about testing and about going to four-year colleges, you can't say to teachers, and you should do this. So that becomes the policy change that I think we are really trying to move towards.
I'm going to do something I've been wanting you to do this whole conference. She's been right in the front row. I mean, I believe, some of you are in the back row, and I respect that. But you've been in the front row all day, and I want to ask, give one opportunity in the last couple of minutes. You're my new friend. Is Jacqueline Lyons. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask a question.
My people forced me to be in the front row.
Who? Oh, they did? Thank you. Okay, and you have a question for the governor?
I do, but I just want to make just a couple of comments. I want to thank the AFT. I particularly want to thank Randi Weingarten for giving our District of Columbia public school students an experience of a lifetime. I want to remind these students back here, because I was a history major, that Maryland was a slaveholding state, and we have right here the first African-American governor of Maryland. And last, because I am a union woman, I want these students to understand that we have two of the major presidents of the two best unions in the United States, Randi and Liz, that were right here. That's something that my grandmother could never dream of. Not even.
I had no idea you were going to be so great.
I'm sorry. I had to say it. It's the history making.
And now the question. Make it good.
I'm sorry. Well, I know in the District of Columbia, as a union leader, we're starting to get a lot of money for teacher apprentice programs and medical CTE programs. Can you give me some suggestions on how do we make sure, excuse my language, that we don't bastardize the money that's coming in and that we keep labor and teacher voice at the table? Because that always becomes the problem.
Sounds like a great question to end on. Governor?
First, bless you. Bless you and thank you, and bless your students.
She's been in that seat all day,
Yes.
that one in that front row.
Yes, and I have to tell you, not just as a not just as a child of unions, my whole family, we are union strong, and we are so grateful for the work that you are doing. And honestly, I think that there's a bunch of things that we have to be able to do in order to make sure that that money is being used wisely and being used how it should be used. And part of that is it needs to be mandated. You know, I have, and I know, and not to get political, but I think about the work that this president has done, where I think this president has done remarkable work in making sure that, yes, we are going to open up opportunities through IRA, we're going to have opportunities through ARPA, we're going to have opportunities for states to be able to build roads and bridges and work on after-school programs and getting more mental health counselors and providers inside of classrooms and doing all these things, and there's significant capital that our states now have an ability to play with, right? But you're going to use union workers. You're going to make sure that these are American jobs. You're going to make sure, and it's the same type of thing that we just said, you know, one of the first things we did, we signed an executive order. One of the great things about being a governor, you can do executive orders. It's actually pretty great. But talking about the work and the capital that's happening on state projects that we are helping to underwrite, we put together programs and platforms for PLAs on that. Because if you are going to use state capital for these things, it's important that you use state workers. It's important that you utilize unions to be able to do the work. And so I think you can help to incentivize it. I think you can help to prioritize it. But I do think it is important for executives to be able to take that role of leadership seriously, that there are also places that you have to say it needs to be mandated. That if that work is going to happen, we need to be clear about who's doing the work and then who it's going to turn around and benefit.
Randi, you have a comment?
Look, culture trumps strategy every moment. And if we don't also change the culture to make it clear that our voice has to be at the table in a meaningful way, that it can't just be done to teachers or to the community. Community and teachers have to be at that table. So then you have a governor. Yes, DC has to become a state, by the way. That would be a good first step. But as the governor said, which is why I'm so honored to have this conversation, you have to have a squeeze this way and this way in order to change policy. And if not, the regular mores that we have been living with in the last 50 years are going to continue to happen, which is that just get good test scores, get enough kids to college, and the school system will look good, as opposed to what we're trying to say, and that's what those resources are about. How do we help each and every kid? How do we help create opportunities for each and every kid? How do we help each and every kid to engage in the pursuit of college, career, life, civic participation? And all of those opportunities are there because that one opportunity to become a teacher, to become a phlebotomist, may be amazing.
Look, I'm going to ask one last quick question. We're a little over here, and we've got food for you. Mary Catherine Ricker is going to come out and close us out. I guess do it while we're even up here, and we're just messing up the whole calendar. But I do want to ask, Governor, one of the things I'm very taken by are your efforts to go around parts of Maryland that may not have been supportive for you, and talk to people who were not on your page before. I'm interested in that because I think that we see a behavior in politics today, particularly at national politics, where one side screams more loudly at the other, and there's not a lot of listening. So you've gone on this listening tour, an engagement tour. Have you found anything that helps find, generate common ground or an ability to get different sides to listen to one another? Because you are doing that, but it's not often done, at least in my experience.
It's amazing because Maryland, there's something really interesting happening in Maryland right now. We're actually choosing to work together. And it's amazing what kind of results you're getting from it. We ended up, and it's true, I ended up literally when I first started the race, I was polling at 1%. By election day, we ended up winning with more individual votes than anyone who'd ever run for governor in the history of the state of Maryland. But the reason I bring that up is this. You don't get to the numbers that we got by just winning Democrats. We won Democrats, we won independents, and we won a big chunk of Republicans. And the reason was simple. We showed up. We went all across the state. And the thing that I promised each and every person, and I said, get used to it, because we're going to be back. And I think when you look at what's now happened, where we're about to complete our second legislative session. In our first legislative session, not only did we go 10 for 10 on all the bills that we introduced, we went 10 for 10 bipartisan. We got Democrat and Republican supports on every single bill that we introduced, to include things like raising a minimum wage, to include things like making the child tax credit permanent. Well, right? And now this year we've introduced 16 bills, and we're not there yet, but we're feeling pretty good. We're about to repeat it again. There's something special happening, and the reason is simple: show up and make your case.
So first of all, big round of applause for Randi Weingarten. Second of all, big round of applause for Governor Wes Moore. Thank you so much. And Mary Catherine, you're going to close this out. We got a lunch, something going on. Why don't you thank the governor too? You can all thank the governor.
It would be my pleasure. Governor Moore, Randi, Steve, thank you so much for the invigorating conversation. Quite frankly, it is inspiring and motivating, right? And you can sit and be inspired, but motivation means you get up out of your seat and you do something about it. And you've given us incredible practical tools to do next that Jackie's going to take away with her. You have given us really motivating tools. And Randi, you have featured so many strong stories that, again, I think stitched together, this is, again, inspiring. It is motivating. And thank you for your visionary leadership. Thank you for the invigorating discussion. Steve?
Jackie next year ought to be on a panel.
Oh, yes. She graciously demurred to a practicing classroom teacher this morning, I will have you know, as a strong union leader does. And I would really love to make sure we thank the staff of Historic 6th and I, an incredible team. Thank you for your gracious and expert hosting. Thank you, too, to Joyful Signing and the press covering today's conference, especially the journalists from Benjamin Banneker High School and Elliott Hine Middle School. And please, join us now in the social hall downstairs for lunch and a reception to continue the conversation and the commitment to support and expand experiential learning and to continue the involvement of students in experiential learning. Join us downstairs to also receive a special takeaway treat from Sunflower Bakery made by the bakers in the Experiential Learning Student Program. Thank you, good afternoon, and we'll see you downstairs.